Okay. Welcome to all of you, and thank you for being here today for today's session, which is entitled Beyond NIH, Expanding Your Research Funding Horizons. My name is Brad Martin. I am the Director for Fast Forward Medical Innovation, and I'm going to serve as sort of an MC for the day, if you will. The genesis for this event really started about, I guess it was almost last spring, when we started getting news about some of these changes to federal funding, changes to the indirect rates, NIH budgets being reduced, DEI issues. And as part of that, Carl Jepsen, our Associate Dean for Research, had the foresight to pull together a consortium, if you will, of research stakeholders to sort of talk about the issues and talk about what can we do to be proactive, develop the strategies that we can use to address these issues. And one of the top things that came up during this meeting was to help our faculty to identify non-federal sources of funding for their research. And that's kind of what brought us to this event here today. How can we help our faculty to diversify their portfolio away from just NIH and find other unique forms of funding for their research? And so that's what brought us here today. And so I think that my first agenda item here today would be to introduce Carl Jepsen to say a few words about what exactly is happening at the federal level and how we can maybe help our faculty get ahead of those issues. So Carl.
Thanks, Brad, and good afternoon, everyone, and those who are here in person and those who are online. Really appreciate you taking the time to come together, what we think is a very important topic. And so I'm just going to kind of go through a little bit of the history of why we are here, as Brad was mentioning, just provide a little context to this and hopefully kind of maybe set the tone for what we want to do over the next 4 hours. So as many of you know, over the past century, so I'm going to go back a little bit. So biomedical research, especially that which was conducted in universities and in medical schools specifically, we've enjoyed a strong partnership with our federal funding agencies. And together we've built out a highly innovative research enterprise. I think many people would agree with me on that. And each administrative change, the administrative change came in with some priority changes, but many of us don't even realize what they were. These were often done with, in partnership, and they always maintain that partnership. And sometimes these changes were implemented over time and strategically, and they try to minimize the disruption to existing programs. Now let's go a little bit more proximal to that, to what has transpired over the last 9 months. So in the last 9 months, we've seen a major shift in the strategy and in the basis of this partnership. Okay, the priority changes have occurred immediately, without notice, and often, sometimes retroactively. Okay, so we find ourselves in a whole new world, okay, and we need to learn how to navigate this. Okay, so this has created a tremendous amount of uncertainty in the support of biomedical research. And as you heard, many consider NIH and other agencies like that, NSF, the crown jewel of the United States. And I think many of us would agree with that, especially those in this audience. Okay, so, but, I don't want to minimize this. The uncertainty and the delays in funding have put real stress on a system that is already running lean. We don't have a lot of options to back us up, okay? And yet the research that we're doing, we know is important. We know it will have value and benefit down the road, but we need to buy that time, okay? And faculty do not have the deep pockets that a lot of people think that they do have to weather these times and to keep their labs in good working order, okay? So today we're going to shift the narrative to us. So in the next 4 hours, we want to take back control of some of this narrative. Okay, so we're going to hear from individuals with experience in funding from foundations, industry, and philanthropy. Okay, so we probably already heard, and many of you have already known, there's a lot of these organizations are already being inundated with applications from with their funding sources. Okay, but as we all know, competitive funding opportunity isn't just about the number of grants that are submitted, it's about getting into the short stack. So how do you get from the big application pile to that short stack? And that's what we really want to dig in today. So we're going to hear a lot of sage advice, not just on what the opportunities are, but how to establish relationships, how to take your ideas, that are really geared toward NSF or NIH and then understand what the agencies are looking for, how to reframe and, you know, repurpose what you're doing. Okay, so it is meaningful to these agencies so that you get into the short stack. So our speaker and panelists, we'll provide much of this and help you understand how to think differently about your work, how to reframe it. So one thing I'd like to do is make sure you're very active today. Ask 1,000 questions, bug the panelists, go over time. Let's drive our moderators crazy today. That's your job. Okay, ask the questions, try to understand how to get your research in line with these funding agencies. Hopefully I'm setting the right tone for this meeting. Okay, I know I'm going to drive Brad crazy on this, but that's okay. I don't mind that. But you have a great agenda today. Please do ask questions. Okay, thank you.
All right, Carl, thanks so much for kind of level setting and describing the problem that we're facing here. I want to reiterate his point. Please, let's have this be as dynamic and interactive as possible. So here's the agenda for the day. In a very general sense, we're going to have 3 different blocks of discussions. The first one is going to be led by Colleen. We're going to be talking about how do you attract foundational dollars or charitable dollars to help fund your research. There'll be a presentation as well as a panel discussion. At that point, then we're going to bring up Mike Ranella, who heads up the business development function for the medical school, is going to talk about how to attract industry sponsorship for your research, whether it be bench science or whether it be clinical trials. And that is a significant bucket of dollars to draw from if you can. We'll take a small break, and we'll come back with Chris Shoemaker, who's from the development office here on the medical school, who'll be talking about how to attract philanthropic donations, donor dollars to help fund your research. And those could be some significant dollars, believe me. Then lastly, we're going to have Gina Stouffer from the grants office who's going to talk a little bit about how to operationalize some of this. What are the resources that we have available to you, and how do you actively get your application to that short stack? So Gina will talk about that. Okay. And throughout all of that, we'll have time for Q&A from each of the different sections. Microphones are down here. We have questions coming from online as well. Okay. So why don't we get started then? First up, we're going to have Colleen Sherman, who's the Director for Corporate and Foundation Relationships, who's going to talk about how you can, again, attract some of these foundational dollars. Thanks, Colleen.
Hello. Thank you, Brad, and thank you, Carl, for setting that tone. I want to bring in the plane on time, Carl. None of this going over. That will not be happening. Also, I do have to say that I have dramatically changed how we're going to structure this talk and then the additional hour. Dr. Henry Dyson from the Faculty Honorifics office will join us for 15 minutes after me to talk about honorifics and what he's doing. I am very excited about the work he's doing, and I can't wait for you to learn about it. And is Catherine here? How do I forward my slide? Oh, there we go. Got it. Okay, great. Got it. I'm ready to go now. So I've changed the name of my talk, but I actually like the original one better, which is The Road Less Traveled. I'm going to talk a little bit about what I do and what the foundation's corporate and foundation relations is. The lights are very bright in here. I mean, I've spoken in here a million times. It's funny how bright it is. So, so forgive me if I'm blinky. So I started working in development at Michigan Medicine 16 years ago. Now, when people talk about how long they've been doing a thing, and I've noticed this when my son went to elementary school and teachers would say, I've been doing this for 30 years, and I would be like skeptical because that's my nature. And I would think, does that make you more qualified? Does 16 years of working in development make me more qualified? It gives me a rich history. So for instance, I worked in this building and I took Alfred Taubman through this building many times. So I know what Alfred Taubman cared about and how he saw the buildings that have his names on them. And I know the thing he was most proud of was the Taubman Medical Research Institute and translational research. So my passion became over time, healthcare equity, and why, depending on your socioeconomic status in this country, you are more likely to die earlier or later, depending on how much money you have in the bank or where you were born or how you grew up. That's just something I'm really interested in. So that really brought me into, after I worked for the A.L. for Taubman Medical Research Institute for 5 years, into corporate and foundation relations, because it's a place where the funders, corporations, and foundations set their priorities. They work very differently than individuals in terms of how they think about funding, because you have a big, often large community of people who are doing the decision making and setting the goals together. So corporate and foundation relations sits within the Office of Development for well, the university at large. There is a team of folks over there that I work very closely with, and then within the Development Office for Michigan Medicine. There's three of us who we call ourselves sort of frontliners, people who do frontline work working with corporations and foundations. One of them is here, Katie McGuinn. So Katie works with all the corporations and foundations who are in the basic sciences, cancer area, and neurosciences, and then other duties is assigned. I do many other things, psychiatry, pediatrics, health equity, global health, these things. And then we had Lee Fernside join us 6 months ago, and she's working on things like diabetes, OB-GYN, and again, other duties is assigned. So there's three of us to provide service to the 4,100 faculty members and 29,000 employees who work at Michigan Medicine. We work fast. We try to give as much value, add as much value as possible, and help you get what you need and get to the funders as quickly as possible. We are about things like shots on goal, and we are about things that help you maximize your chances to Carl's point of getting in the small stack. Oh, I've got this. Okay. So how do you do it? What are some of the best practices? So I'm going to do a little bit of storytelling, and any story I tell, I'm not going to name names, but I'm going to give examples of things, sometimes worst practices. I think sometimes worst practices teach us more than best practices. I mean, it's 6 of one, half dozen of the other. But here's an example. The Community Foundation of Battle Creek many years ago, and I'm naming that name because other names will be non-identified, wanted to give us $10,000. And the Community Foundation of Battle Creek has never, or at that time, never heard of IDC. They don't know what IDC is. You all know what IDC is, indirect costs. But I come from the nonprofit sector. I spent the first 20 years of my career in the nonprofit sector. I never heard of IDC until I started working in corporate and foundation relations in 2012. So someone says to me, well, we can't accept the money unless they put their statement about what they'll pay regarding IDC on their website. So what the institution, the administration is asking me to do is say to a funder, the Battle Creek Community Foundation, we need you to change your website for us so you can give us money. Do you think that's a good idea? If you were a fundraiser, would you want to have that conversation? So that was of a time, and we have evolved to change, and we need to change because the nonprofit sector is dramatically different than the academic sector in terms of how they think about philanthropy and community and the kinds of things they fund. If you look at the funders in the state of Michigan, research for most of them is not their top priority. Well, they might have some interest in understanding and research. They're interested in helping people. So when you talk to these funders, understanding and knowing your audience, it's so different than the NIH. Folks who are reviewing your grants at the NIH are your peers. People who work in foundations and for corporations are a different kind of colleague or professional. And so I advise doing a lot of listening and having a lot of patience. So keep trying. As I mentioned, shots on goal. what do I mean by that? So again, I'll tell a few more stories. There's a faculty member who fairly recently, last couple of years, I worked with in the Department of Psychiatry. The community health, the Michigan Health Endowment Fund is one of those rare funders who is a conversion foundation where Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan wanted to change their tax status. And so the governor, Rick Snyder at the time said, well, great, you can do that, but you need to have a board and you need to have a foundation. I'm going to appoint the board and then you give the money away. So they ended up putting 1.2, which went up to $1.6 billion in the bank, and they give that money back to the state of Michigan to help people. Their priorities are things like healthy aging, nutrition, healthy lifestyles, and behavioral health. So when they were created and started giving money away in 2015, someone looked at me and said, the only kind of grants we'll ever get from them are in public health. We proved them wrong times 10. I think they're the second highest funder to Michigan medicine from the foundation community. How did we do it? Well, we had a couple bumps in the road. We had a few folks who were really upset that they didn't want to look at her aims in her proposal and like the standard NIH format. But we learned how to talk to them. So we have this young person, early career researcher, who's working on a topic in psychiatry. And we partnered together. We met with the foundation and she wrote a killer LOI, 2 pages. I edited it for her. And then she ended up getting a $400,000 grant from them. And she was able to leverage that into, recently she was awarded $16 million, also from a quasi-private funder called Pecori. Many of you have heard of that one. John, how am I doing on time? Okay, I've got a few more minutes left. So this slide, ask for assistance. So yes, I put goofy comics on my slides because I don't think you can go wrong with goofy comics. So I think of the 3 that I was able to find, I like this one the best because in this picture, I'm the guy who's standing on the side and I'm going to help you push. And sometimes I do feel like I have to figure it out, right? Like some of the things that we have to, the new strategies that we need to develop. It's a really creative part of corporate and foundation relations. So I want to tell you what our vision is for the corporate and foundation relations team and the kinds of things we do to help people, the kind of work we do on the day-to-day. We wake up learning about foundations. We go to sleep often learning about foundations and how they give money away and what they're passionate about. Katie McGuinn, who I introduced, who's sitting over here. Katie, could you wave? When I first met Katie, I thought, oh, Katie lives like I do. She's really excited about why foundations do what they do, the choices they make, and how we communicate with them and help you amplify what you do and get in front of them to make your pitch. So every week we send out a newsletter which includes between 20 and typically 40 RFPs. Is it the perfect tool? It is not the perfect tool. We are constantly looking for ways to improve our communications with you. Does anyone get our email newsletter? We call it the RFP report. Gina gets it. Ken gets it. If you don't get it, see Katie or me at any point, and we will add you to our list. Are we proud of it? We work really hard and put a lot of energy into it to really tell the story about what foundations are doing. So let's say a new RFP comes in and we're excited about it, like it's new news to us, or okay, here's an example. Melinda Gates has been just pushing out the money. She's pushing the money out the door and she's talking about women's health. Now, it concerns me, frankly. Am I nervous about how Melinda Gates is giving money? Sure I am, because I think it's really hard for us at Michigan to get. But I also think we need to know and we need to try and we need to communicate with you how to, everything we know about how to do it and what we're learning about it. Our email newsletter is a way for us to talk about this and tell you what we know, but also anything that we see in the writing that she's doing, we're going to do some reach out. We usually start with things like Michigan experts, or we might even go to leadership within a department and say, hey, we've got this thing that has to do with the intersection of women's health and menopause. Menopause is a new one. We're seeing more grants come out there for menopause. Who do we need to talk to and communicate with? So I encourage each of you to keep your Michigan experts profiles up to date. That helps us find you a lot. We do a lot of keyword searching that way because our community is so large. We want to be able to find you fast when the opportunity arises. Our work is very much about striking when the iron is hot. One thing, because of the volume of our work and where we are in the history of time, 2025 has been a really fun year for us. And when I say fun, I mean busier than we've ever been. And we feel valued in a way in terms of our work because everything is changing. And we want to hear from you. We want to talk to you. We want to respond to you. And we want to provide content that you can actually use. So Katie has done 16 presentations so far this year. Katie lost track, and I've lost track too. Katie does a lot of presentations with the foundations she works with, like American Cancer Society. She did a institution-wide that went to any university across the state of Michigan who does research. So did you have the one up north, Northern Michigan? No, I know you had Michigan State. Wayne State, Oakland University. So we are trying to do more of these collaborative presentations because the foundations want that from us. And if Michigan can lead in these areas, it helps you, our faculty, which is our job number one for us, but it also shows how collaborative we are, and that's helpful as well. We will continue to do this. If there is a foundation you're interested in, we can do the outreach in a way you might not be able to and see if they'll do an info session with us. We do most of these online these days. We love to do campus visits with funders, and we do those as well. We have the University of Michigan Credit Union coming over to the Ypsilanti Healthcare Center tomorrow. I know many of you are researchers, but we do things that are programmatic as well. Other tools. So my favorite tool is the library's webpage. I think that we can send out these slides after the fact, and so you'll have all of our links to sign up for our RFP report, and to go to the library's research funding grants guide. So I go every day to this page. I use the tools. You'll be hearing from Paul Barrow, who is the librarian who manages these tools, in just a minute. And then we have a page called foundations.umich.edu, which has insights, all sorts of foundation insights and data and tools for developing grants. And then we have an early career page there. I've shared the University of California, I think it's actually SD, not SF. Their awesome list of early career funders. Yes, we use other people's tools. I don't mind that. I think that's wise. And I want to be able to share ours as well. We have a CFR webpage. Katie and I are working, and I would say Katie mostly, are working on an update of that page so we can get the information to you faster. So with that, it is 1:27. I'm 3 minutes early, Carl. And I will now introduce my new friend, Dr. Henry Dyson. Okay, so I'm going to read you his introduction, which means I need to squint. Okay, so Dr. Henry Dyson leads the faculty honorifics team. Having acquired an academic background in philosophy and classics, he joined U of M as a faculty member in those departments and eventually decided to apply his expertise to helping students and advancing the university's reputation by creating an office to recruit, prepare, and nominate U of M students for prestigious external scholarships, such as the Rhodes Scholarship to Oxford. Following these successes, Henry was invited by the Office of the Vice President for Research to launch the Faculty Honorifics Office. I've asked him to share today about his efforts to strengthen U of M's national and global reputation by building nomination pipelines for the most prestigious external recognitions. This is important work that, in my humble opinion, was long left undone, and I can't imagine a better person to do it than Henry. He works across schools, colleges, and institutes to support faculty in pursuing prizes, medals, fellowships, and elected societies, including the national academies. So Henry's going to share his perspective on why this work matters for the funding landscape, exploring how honorifics, though distinct from searching for funding, serves as a form of reputational capital that strengthens faculty competitiveness, especially in non-federal funding competitions. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Henry Dyson.
Thanks, Colleen. I appreciate it. Thanks for the invitation to come. We met at a meeting last week, and she asked if I would come tell you a little bit about what Honorifics is doing. So I want to tell you a little bit about what we're doing, why we think it matters for the future of funding. So my office is located in OVPR, and we're just about 2 years into this launch. I think on Friday, we'll pass the 2-year anniversary of when we were announced. So the key point that I want to make is that honorifics are not just symbolic recognition, but actually strategic assets that will strengthen our competitiveness in both federal and non-federal funding as we go into the new funding environment. So I'm going to share some working hypotheses that we have backed by some research about how reputational capital accumulates and why it matters in the current funding environment. We are by no means the solution to the current funding challenge. But we do think that honorifics are going to become more important in the future, and we want to make sure that we're equipping our researchers with every possible advantage as they go out. So what are honorifics? How do we define them? I'm going to give you 3 markers that we use to delineate our work. The first is that they are external as opposed to internal awards, prizes, medals, etc. So they're offered by other universities, by US federal agencies, by professional organizations, and philanthropic foundations. So the second marker is that honorifics are retrospective. They are looking backwards to recognize high impact research that has already been published and accepted by the field. And this is what distinguishes them from funding opportunities that are forward-looking. There is a middle ground here between them, especially when it comes to early career researchers, limited submission grants and fellowships that carry a high amount of prestige, but still have a forward-looking component to them. So our faculty honorifics office works closely with corporate and foundation relations and with the Office of Research Development and OVPR on that middle ground. The third marker of honorifics is that they tend to rely on third-party nominations rather than first-person applications. And again, this distinguishes them from limited submissions and some forms of fellowships in the middle ground. So our primary clients are not necessarily researchers themselves, but usually university unit and department leaders or prominent faculty who are nominating their colleagues for these opportunities. We also work with a lot of external nominators. So honorifics can occur at every career stage. We're not just talking about lifetime achievement awards at the end of a career. Some helpful distinctions that we use as we're developing nomination strategies. It helps to distinguish awards, medals, and prizes on the one hand, and elected societies on the other. And I'll talk a little bit about both of those as we go on. It helps to distinguish between field-specific or disease-specific honorifics and open field honorifics that are looking at top researchers across different disciplines or diseases. So field-specific awards will often come from disciplinary professional societies and organizations, whereas open medals and prizes such as the LASK or the National Medal of Science will often come from some of those organizations, but they'll be looking at top performers across all of those. So some examples here, the Kavli Prize for Neuroscience is extremely high in prestige, but we consider it field specific, whereas the Lasker Clinical and Basic Science Awards are good examples of open field. And you can apply that also for elected societies. Many disciplines or disease-specific organizations may have an elected fellows program in addition to their dues-paying members. And then we work with nominations for open field elected societies such as ASCI, AAP, National Academy of Medicine, AAAS fellows. So our office in the last 2 years has been focused mainly on developing the university's strategy for the highest prestige field-specific and open field awards and societies. But today I actually want to talk about the sort of compounding advantage of some of those field-specific awards for researchers as they go out into the field. So this is the machinery behind the scenes. This is how nominations work and how my office works to support them. So if you start in the middle of the diagram, nomination decisions happen in a lot of different places across the university. So in Michigan Medicine, we specifically support the Dean's Faculty Awards Committee, which is under George Mashore. And we are looking at U of M nominations to a lot of the most prestigious open field awards in that group. We also support nominations, as I said, for Michigan Medicine faculty to AAAS fellows, to ASCI, and next year we're hoping to help coordinate a more robust project for AAP as well. So a nomination decision involves 3 separate elements that have to come together: a nominee, an opportunity or an award, and a nominator, usually supported by letters of support. And we can support the process by working on each of those. Sometimes we will research awards and then try to identify U of M faculty or teams of faculty that would be strong nominees for those awards. Sometimes we start with a faculty member and then we research possible nomination awards for them. And we keep track of external networks and who would be strong nominators or letter writers for all of our nominees. Once those decisions have been made, then the packets have to be put together. We have to gather CVs, we have to draft materials, we have to draft letters, we have to coordinate external letters, and then all of these things have to be submitted into a nomination portal. So I have 2 program managers in my office who manage a portfolio of these awards. We supported 160 different nominations last year for 100 different faculty across the university. When I first launched the office, I sort of did a listening tour with leaders around different units on campus, and a lot of them recognized the importance of honorifics, but they just didn't have the bandwidth, the faculty and staff support to do this work. So reducing that administrative burden for our nominations has been a key component of our office. I'll say quickly, we support the Dean's Faculty Awards Committee, or DFAC, but we're increasingly working with centers and institutes and with departments to nominate their, bolster their nomination processes. So just one example, the Michigan Neuroscience Institute created a new honorifics committee last year that's chaired by Huda Akil and Kent Berridge. And they looked at what we were doing to support the DFAC and have now instituted that. It's going to be a big point of emphasis for us in this coming year. So I think this is one of 2 key slides that I wanted to give you today. And again, the key point that I want to make here is that these honorifics are not merely symbolic recognitions for individuals alone. They're strategic assets both for individuals and for the institutions to build our reputation. Like other forms of capital, the value of honorifics compounds over time. So early career awards start the process, mid-career fellowships and memberships consolidate it, and then senior awards can amplify institutional prestige in ways that benefit all of our colleagues. In the new funding environment where resources are more scarce and competition is more fierce, just having a good proposal is not going to be enough. We need to equip our researchers with every available advantage. So in this new landscape, honorifics as reputational assets are a smart investment and something that in this time of uncertainty is at least moderately in our control to get these nominations out. So we want to partner with you to take advantage of these opportunities. Here real quick is a review of the empirical evidence for honorifics influencing funding success. So the term the Matthew effect comes from a well-known 2018 PNAS study on R01 funding. And it's drawn from the biblical verse, to those who have, more will be given, which is Matthew 25:29. I had to look it up. By comparing applicants that were just above and just below the funding cutoff, in other words, applicants that had been judged essentially equal in merit, they were able to discern that those who had previously won grants from the NIH were significantly more likely to secure funding. So that study was specifically on NIH funding and specifically looking at the impact of previous funding decisions on subsequent funding decisions. But other articles have also extended this analysis to other reputational signals. So they have looked at factors such as institutional prestige, publication in high impact journals, and accumulated awards. All of these reputational signals act as heuristics or cognitive shortcuts that reviewers use when they're making difficult funding decisions. So the 2023 study in particular concludes that researchers who carry strong recognition across multiple assets are more likely to succeed in funding competitions. And the point here is not that reputational signals will save a bad proposal, but it's that in decisions between equally strong proposals, reputational signals can tip the balance. It's not just about getting the short stack, it's actually getting out of the short stack and making it on top of the line of the funding cutoff. So why do reviewers rely on these signals? Because each of these represents a prior act of peer review, being hired and tendered by a respected institution, publishing in top journals, winning competitive grants, all require judgment by peers. What the research shows is that reviewers then use these accumulated judgments as proxies of excellence and expert consensus, so that past validation compounds into future advantage. And again, we think that in an increasingly competitive funding environment, these signals will make more of a difference. So those studies were all done on federal funding, NIH and NSF in particular. But here's why we think that these will be even more important for non-federal funding. So here are sort of three working hypotheses that we have in this area. First, foundations and corporate funding decisions are usually shaped by both subject matter experts and non-experts, the latter weighing in on factors like mission fit and organizational priorities. So we hypothesize that these non-experts are even more likely to fall back on reputational signals as proxies of excellence and expert consensus. Second, we think that it's safe to assume that there's a significant overlap between the subject matter experts who are called on to review non-federal funding proposals and those who serve on juries for major disciplinary and open field honorifics. They're also likely to be voting members of national academies and other prominent elected societies. So sending a steady stream of excellent U of M nominations to these committees is a form of institutional reputation management. And finally, we think that it's reasonable to assume that corporations and foundations will place extra weight on reputation and therefore fall back on these heuristics, since their own brands benefit from being linked to proven and emerging leaders in biomedical and health sciences. So honorifics function like long-term investments, starting early, reinvesting consistently, and allowing the benefits to compound, but this still leaves the problem of limited faculty and staff resources. So here are, I think, the best bargains at each career stage, and I'm happy to talk more about this in the Q&A. Encourage early career faculty to go after competitive funding and to be persistent if they are not initially successful. So some of those resources were already shared. But don't forget about those disciplinary or even subdisciplinary early researcher awards, the sort of pure honorifics. Winning one or more of these small awards starts the narrative that a researcher is a top performer in the field. Small investments compound over time. At the mid-career level, we think that elected societies are definitely the best bang for the buck, because the nominations for these happen only one time per year, and Michigan can reasonably expect to have multiple recipients for many of these societies per year. That makes them by far the most economical form of honorifics nominations. So when I talk to departments and units, I often say, if you can do nothing else, figure out what the top elected societies are for your field and consistently nominate your faculty for those. If you're a mid-career researcher, talk to your mentors about the elected societies that I've already put forward. And then if you're at the senior level, Top awards boost not only your individual prestige, but also add to the university's fund of reputational capital. So the cumulative effect is a durable base of institutional prestige that can benefit future generations in competitive funding applications. So while I don't have a silver bullet to offer for the current funding crisis by any means, here are 4 ways that we're hoping that our office can lend a hand as we collectively move into this new environment. First, think 2 for 1 on any internal nominations. So again, when I talk to folks, a lot of departments and units had a process for internal nominations, but not external nominations. If you put together a packet as a unit or department leader, or if you're a faculty member who's asked to put together a packet for one of these nominations, if we can find an external nomination opportunity for you, we can get a 2 for 1. It is not 100% more work to put together an external nomination. If we have a good nomination packet, it's about 20% extra work to turn that around. Sometimes my office can help with that. The second point is we would love to train your staff to be able to do that. So I have a small office. We're focused on a lot of these prestige, but we are spread through the university. So we would love to invite your staff, whether at the lab level or at the department or unit level, to learn from some of the best practices that we've developed over the last 2 years, and to increase the institution's capacity to get that out. Outside of my office, I've not encountered any units that have an FTE 100% devoted to honorifics, but that doesn't mean that every lab manager and every executive partner in a department or unit has to reinvent the wheel for themselves. Finally, a new piece that we are looking at is doing honorifics reviews and nomination strategies for multi-stage funding proposals. We're trying to roll this out with OVPR's Bold Challenges grants. So what we want to do is look at the researchers who are being put forward in those funding proposals and making sure that they have every reputational advantage as they go out. There is a long lag time on some of these honorifics nominations, so the earlier we get started at the seed funding stage, the better. And finally, share your successes with us. The QR code here takes you to our Suggest a Candidate nomination. Self-suggestions are very much encouraged. So if you have a major breakthrough in your research, if you have something that's high impact, please let us know about it, and let's help generate a nomination strategy for you. All right, I think that is all for me. Pass it back. Thank you.
So can you hear me through this? Okay, great. I'm going to ask Paul Barrow and Ken Kwan and Henry to come up and put on these lavalier mics, these lovely mics. And while they do that, I'm going to introduce you to Paul and to Ken. First off, so I don't forget at the end, I want to say this. Thank you to FFMI, who are fabulous partners. I work with the FFMI office regularly. Mike Ranalla and I were joking that we have a road show going and we need to learn some song and dance so we can be more entertaining when we present because we do so much of it together. I think we're solid bookends, FFMI and Corporate and Foundation Relations from Michigan Medicine's Office of Development. And I'm grateful to Brad and to Carl and to John and to, why am I blanking on your name? To Catherine for helping us do this today. Thank you so much. And I'm sorry about that. That is my middle-aged lady brain. And so with that, so before Henry and I take questions about our presentations, I want to welcome Paul and Ken. Paul Barrow is the University of Michigan's Foundation and Grants Librarian. He serves as our specialist in all things grant seeking and philanthropy. He provides consultation to faculty, students in the nonprofit community, and equips us with research tools like Pivot and Foundation Directory Online. It's been my pleasure to work with him for many years and to welcome him today. Thank you so much for being here, Paul. In addition, so yesterday, Katie let me know that Ken agreed to be part of our panel, and I was so excited to have him. In addition to a robust list of awards from the NIH, Dr. Kenneth Kwan has received funding from the Simons Foundation, the Cayman Biomedical Research Institute, Research Institute, the March of Dimes, the Autism Science Foundation, and the Brain Research Foundation. And you can tell us if I missed any of them. He has served as a reviewer for the Eagles Autism Foundation and think the NFL team, those Eagles, March of Dimes, and Sergey Brin's Autism-Related Philanthropy. He is an associate professor of human genetics and a member of both the Michigan Neuroscience Institute and the Center for Cell Plasticity and Organ Design. So, as I said before we hear from audience questions, I have a couple questions for each of us to kick us off. I'm going to start with Paul. Paul, will you take a few minutes to tell us more about your role and how researchers focusing on healthcare in particular can most effectively work with you and the resources the library makes available? And before I let you answer, I want to say we can keep it fun and casual. So just tell us stories about what you do and maybe even a little bit more about your background.
Can everybody hear me? Thanks, Colleen. Thank you all. This is great to be here. I have never been in this auditorium, even though I've been in the building multiple times. So this is a special day for me. I think what you're all doing is fantastic. Please don't stop. Keep going. A little bit about me. My original degrees were in music. I've got a bachelor's in guitar performance, which is obviously how I developed the skills to be in the funding world. I also have a degree in library science, and I am a librarian. I love it because I get to spend other people's money to buy tools for you to keep doing the great things that you are doing. Primarily, I would say what I do, I meet with people individually or in small groups, and I get them connected with the tools that we have purchased. Another piece of what I do is I purchase stuff, so I'm constantly on the lookout for new things. The key thing I would like you to take away from this, I'm your friend. Contact me at any time. We have lots of librarians in the medical library, and I am happy to connect them with you for special work, but I'm also willing to help.
Okay, I got it. Thanks, Brad. That's great. So as I said, Paul and I have worked together for many years, and so we talk about the tools all the time. Judy Smith is a librarian out of the Taubman Library. Do we say she's from the Taubman Library? And she is such an asset, and she joins Mike and I for these roadshow presentations we do quite often for departments. And I have said to Paul and to Judy many times, I don't use Pivot because they love Pivot. So feedback on Pivot, I encourage it to them and to me as well. I'd love to know how you use it and about its value. So that link I put up in my presentation for the library's webpage, if you haven't been there, I just suggest you visit because there's so many tools that are available through that page. Paul, I'm really grateful to you for being here today. So Ken, it is nice to meet you. Thank you for being here today. What I did when Katie shared with me that you would be willing to join us is I looked at your history and e-research of all the grants you've received, and you have written a lot of applications. I think it's incredible, and I also see a very diverse group of funders. So how did you find and identify those funders? And then did you approach them simply by responding to an RFP, or did you approach them differently? Can you tell us a little bit about that? And what do you think you did that led to your success?
Wow. I guess I'll answer the last question first. So I think, you might think that I've succeeded, but really the key here is, you don't know about my failures. And so like with the foundation success that I have, for every foundation I got money from, there's multiple that I get money from, Cyril, the PU, Sloan, McKnight, Whitehall.
I know about your failures because they're in e-research.
Well, you do know about my failure, so that's great. And I think, I guess what I've learned from there is that it is a numbers game, and what I've learned through that process is that you can take the failures in stride and then learn to repackage and recycle your ideas to make a better fit for like another opportunity.
How often do you get feedback from foundations or from reviewers?
Almost never. So that's kind of an expectation when you submit to a foundation. So because I've also been on the other side of the panel, there is like lively discussion on each application, but for reasons that they don't want people to kind of push back on why that this grant not get funded or whatever, they just don't provide feedback as policy. So
Um, One story I love to tell is one that Johan Johnson told me. So he received one of those Doors to Clinical Scholars Awards, and he's like, I got it the third time I applied. So we've done sessions on those awards. They're very cool, prestigious awards, and you've got to keep trying. Just because they said no once doesn't mean it's a forever no.
true.
Um, do you have an example of one that you might have applied for multiple times?
Some of those opportunities you only get one chance, right? The limited submissions one, you only get one chance, and there's like there's a time from when you started your faculty to when you can apply for those. So those, for people just starting, you need to really watch out for those deadlines. Those are not soft deadlines. But there are some foundations that have multiple levels of awards. So just because you didn't get the early one doesn't mean that you might not get the middle or the late career ones. So,
Right. The identification part, how did you find some of those bigger awards, taking you back to that part of that question?
sure. So when I started, we didn't have the resources that you guys now provide, and I think super, super valuable. And really, thank you for
I
that.
love hearing that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
So it seems, I've been looking at these emails that you guys sent, and they seem really comprehensive. There's nothing that I know that is not there, and it's a lot more that I didn't know. So in the beginning, it's a lot of word of mouth, connecting with other early career researchers to see where those deadlines are and what is more appropriate, and then just kind of making a calendar of when the deadlines are and applying for them. Yeah.
We've seen examples of other folks who do it really well, and I think you're right. I love to see how there's a lot, like in your record in e-research, there's a lot of like didn't get it early on, and then you start to see that you've gotten it and you've gotten a few more, and that means that you're dogged. And that's the one thing that I advise people to be dogged. It's a lot of work, but it really can lead to making magic happen. I'm going to turn to Henry now, and I want to give a special shout out to Henry and what he's doing. So even though I think we only really met in person last week for the first time, and that's crazy, but I have known about you and your work since you started doing it, and I was excited from the minute I heard you were going to be doing it because we need it. Right. So when I think of what Henry does, and I might frame it a little bit differently, I think of like, why haven't we gotten Alaska? Over in the corporate and foundation relations world, we haven't had the time or the focus beyond doing outreach to Alaska to really do this level of work. Could you tell me those numbers again of applications you assisted with last year?
We supported 160 something for 100 plus faculty.
So that is, that's how many, like 3 a week? No more than that. Yeah, 3 a week, 3 a week. That's to me is amazing. 3 applications supporting that a week. That is a lot of work. And Paula Van Velden, who worked at the Med School Office of Research for many years and also worked in the development office, is very experienced. And you've got a rock star over there in terms of someone who knows how to get things over the line. So my first question to you gives voice to what I think many in attendance might be wondering. How do researchers position themselves to compete for honorifics?
Thanks. It's a good question. So I think you mentioned that my background is in philosophy, so I answer questions like a philosopher sometimes. I think honorifics are not the primary goal right? You don't set out to go win awards or be elected to societies, or maybe you shouldn't. The goal is to do high impact work. So to make discoveries that change the field, innovations that save and improve lives. So, the first point is go do that. Be an excellent faculty member in all of the ways that faculty member or, but then I think recognition of that high impact work is sort of a second order goal, that it does pay to occasionally look up and think about and plan for and know what some of those deadlines are. And in that sense, I think having in mind some of these things that you want to do, and I think a lot of that is developed through really great mentorship and sponsorship in the field. So I think some people that I've encountered on campus are just blessed with really great mentors and sponsors who have taught them how to do this. And I think some of our peer institutions that are really good at honorifics have built that into the culture of their institution. And I think other people here have to go out and cultivate that mentorship and sponsorship in the field intentionally. So one of the first things that we ask folks is who here on the Michigan faculty and who at some of our peer institutions would be willing to nominate you or write letters of support. So cultivating relationships with top people in the field that are well connected, that are members. Some of the elected societies, for example, the national academies, you have to be nominated and supported in your nomination and ultimately elected by currently elected members. And so, through U of M connections, which we have a lot of National Academy members and well-connected folks, but also being out and active in the field, cultivating those relationships, and then having conversations with them about the things. And the last point that I'll just say quickly is that I think what we share in terms of putting together competitive funding applications and putting together competitive nominations is storytelling. So knowing what the through lines are about what you've done in your career, what it is that you still hope to accomplish, how you've impacted the field. Another thing that we're sort of looking at is awards are not always about individuals. And I think that's one of the problems that we've had in the past. So Lasker Awards, for example, don't typically go to individuals. They go to high impact discoveries, and they look for who are the most important contributors to those breakthroughs and discoveries in the field. So knowing when our U of M researchers have been among, say, the top 3 contributors to a major breakthrough, that's the kind of research that we're doing. And so I think having that storytelling mindset is another habit that I would encourage.
That's fabulous. It parallel to this is in some of our work in CFR, we're seeing more and more foundations who are finding the researchers they want to work with. It's so the McKinsey, I want to say Phillips, but that's a pop star. Jeff Bezos' ex-wife, Mackenzie, not Bezos. What is her last name? Thank you, Mackenzie Scott. The way they find people to fund and partner with, it's not an RFP process, it's not an application. For us, that means we have to work a little bit harder and partner with you. Podcasts, foundations are hearing, these are not people from academia, they're hearing about things that interest them on podcasts, and then they are approaching those researchers and talking about funding. So they are more often to go to society meetings. If you hear or see a foundation at one of your meetings when you're traveling and presenting, get the card. It really can make a difference. So I have more questions, but I want to take some time. We have half an hour left, and I really want to make this your conversation. So we have these mics. These mics are live. And John, do we have any questions that have come up online yet? We don't have any questions yet. You are letting us down. Who's got a question? What? Brad has a question. And I was teasing you about letting us down, or just joking. My friend Chris is laughing. He is laughing at my bad joke.
This is for Henry, I guess. Thanks so much for coming in. I had not seen the honorifics presentation before, so thanks so much. But I'm reacting to seeing it for the first time, and I imagine most of our faculty are as well. But obviously, I think that honorifics are a great strategy for faculty who are key opinion leaders at the peak of their career. But what can a junior faculty member do in this space? I mean, I imagine some people are probably thinking, that's not for me. I haven't achieved that much yet to be at that level. Is that true, or how can they self-select, or when should they self-select?
It's a good question, and thank you. I think if we think paradigmatically about the last curve, this is the downside of talking about the last curve as sort of the paradigmatic. We've only got, arguably a few researchers and teams that can compete at that level. And so I think, really focusing on what the context is and looking at the field-specific, discipline-specific, subdiscipline-specific societies that you're a member of. So one of the things that I do is in reviewing and looking, so sometimes we start with an award, right? So we start with an award, and we research the award, and we say who at U of M would be a competitive nominee for this, and who would be a competitive nominee now, and who would be a competitive nominee in the future. But yeah, it depends. So the Dean's Faculty Awards Committee under George has a list of, 140 of these that we look at. So we meet every other month, and the staff meet in the intervening months, and we look at what's coming up in the next, 3 to 6, 9 months. And then we start brainstorming who we think could be competitive. We look for previous recipients. So if you look at the calls for nominations, they all kind of use more or less similar criteria. So actually researching who the last 10 years of recipients were for these awards, you can start to get a much better understanding of what it is that they're looking for, what a competitive nomination would need to look like, and then looking at who at U of M fits that bill. Right, so that's one piece that we do in support of Georgia's Dean's Faculty Awards Committee. But the other thing that we do is sometimes departments or self-nominations will come into us and they'll say, hey, this person has been really big in our field. What can we do for this person? And so we try to get an understanding of what their most important contributions are to the field. And if those are going to be competitive for open field awards, and part of that is, as we sometimes joke, you have to win best in class before you can win best in show, right? So has this person been recognized as a top researcher within their field or their disease? So we're looking at what their professional associations are, what their major contributions are. And if they haven't won those things, then we go to those organizations first, and we try to match at career stage, early, mid, pinnacle of the career, what would be the next right steps to get that person nominated. And in some cases, we see that as a multi-year strategy that's then building towards nominating them for an open field. I can go on for a long time on this, so please cut me off at some point. To win one of these big open field awards, you kind of have to win 2 different competitions. One is that it's a competition between ideas, right? What are the breakthroughs that are likely to be recognized because they have had high clinical impacts, because they have really transformed the field in various different ways? And then who were the top contributors to that? So we're trying to find those narrative lines and then make sure that when that time comes, not everybody is going to have that, right? So some people's impact is going to be really localized within their field, their discipline, their disease, and that's perfectly fine. There are other forms of faculty excellence as well. Some people are going to go forward for really fantastic mentoring or service contributions in the field. So there's a lot of different ways to be excellent as a faculty member. There are honorifics that can support each of those different things and at different career stages.
So for years, when we look at the early career awards, what we see is we see the coasts, and we can easily say, well, oh, that's a private school university bias, or it's a coastal bias. But honestly, we haven't had Henry's role until we established Henry's role, right? And now that we're focusing on it, I think we can do it. And I'm really excited that we as a university are having conversations like this. And that's why I wanted him to speak to you today, because we all need to be thinking about this to accomplish it. right? And so for Ken, I mean, you should be thinking about it now, right? You have a question?
Thanks for my as a together. Timely, very important. And also thanks to Colleen and team for throwing us grants buffet every now and then. Super. I mean,
We love hearing that. I'm so glad it's valuable. Will you tell us your name and your department as well once we get your mic straightened out?
sure. Can you hear me better? Yeah, great. This is Setu Pichaya from the Department of Urology and Pathology. Uh, and yeah, I have a couple of questions. One is basically about the resources that we already have, the NI, natural intelligence resources that we have here and all around us who can help us with the appropriate grants that we can apply to. But in addition to that, and you may be talking about it in future sessions, or maybe there are other resources that I'm unaware of, are there assistive AI resources that as a faculty on the other end can sit and say, hey, you know what? This is what I do. This is my background. What are the different types of grant mechanisms that are out there that I can potentially apply to, that I'll be eligible for? As well as, okay, I mean, I have these set of honorifics. Uh, what can I cater myself towards, and how can I even repurpose what I have to something that I don't even know I could repurpose? Are there such resources available, or something that I guess you guys are thinking of?
Ken, you're nodding, and Paul, I'm going to ask you to give an answer to this question first.
Yes, there are tons of resources on campus. You've got brilliant people doing brilliant work, and they will talk with you. I think the library, while one of the goals with some of these experts, their magic is to move to the short stack. The library is intending to help you find the stack. The tool that I recommend the most, I know Colleen's going to slap me later, but Pivot, the database Pivot. You can create an account. It sends you an email every week telling you the latest things that are coming out. And I hate to say this, but it's got prestigious awards in it. The Neuroscience Award is listed in it. You can stay on top of that stuff so you as an individual can get information and then go to the experts to dig deeper. You've got tons of support here. I can't say enough about CFR, the great people and the magic that they do. And I gotta say, look me up. I'm happy to meet with you, get you going with anything. The library is there to support you.
Thanks, Paul. Ken, do you have anything to add?
No, I just thought that's a great idea. Like if there's some kind of AI-like tool for us to, this is what I do, what opportunities, that is something that would be amazing to have.
Perhaps, I mean, with the, I guess, funding priorities that might potentially change, and history, something that an AI tool
You,
possibly could kind of
you know
assimilate a little.
who's starting to play with that is our colleagues in the Med School Office of Research. I'm thinking about Sandy Alberto, who we partner with on limited submissions. Sandy's fabulous, and we are trying to use the existing AI tools to see if they can help us narrow that. For the tools we are developing to further hone connecting RFPs, and we've created you probably know about this already, but a series of thematic lists. That's not perfect by any means. I would say never be afraid to ask AI for help and see what you come up with, because first of all, I paid Paul Barrow to give a shout out to our team and tell us how brilliant we are. You just made my year, Paul. And then if you show us where the haystack is, we're going to have a much better shot of finding the needle, right? So if you go to so pathology, Katie and I kind of share pathology and urology. We sort of work on those foundations together. Did you know that, Katie? Yeah, sort of. Right. we've been meeting with the pathology folks and looking to like hone in and come up with some new strategies. But if we know those foundations a little bit better, then we can figure out the strategy and the work with you. So that's my take. Henry, do you have anything to add on this one?
No, I'll pass for the moment on it.
Okay. John, it looks like we have a question
Thank you.
from
Yeah.
our
We do have about 140 virtual attendees with us today, and a couple questions have come in.
let's say hi. Everybody wave to the virtual attendees. You can see them, but everyone in the room is waving.
So the first question is for CFR. It asks, how can faculty learn how to write proposals for foundations? And do you provide consultations and feedback to those that submit those proposals?
That's a terrific question, and it is also one of my favorite parts of the job. And I'm looking at Gina, who works in the Med School Office of Research, who does a lot of programming for faculty members. We have boot camps that come out of the Office of Research, and many, many tools and classes to help you do the writing piece. So I would say this, writing for many foundations and corporations, it's very different. So with corporate fundraising, the way we typically approach it is we might get a lead from, like we've been working with DTE recently. Okay, so give us a paragraph and give us a content expert, and then we have Zoom and we make a pitch. It's much more pitch focused rather than a written proposal where you're going to do your 6 or 7 pages and make your case in an iterative fashion, right? It's just different writing. So Katie, Lee, and I from my team, we review proposals, and like I said, for me, that's my favorite part of the job. I love doing it. I love learning about the work. And then sometimes that leads us to the, oh, if this is good for such and such funder, can we apply it to another funder? We can look at those things. So as much as we can't work with every single faculty, there's just too many. If you have something, ask us and we will parse it out. We'll figure out what it is and how it needs to be resourced. You're nodding, Ken. Do you have anything to add to that one about working with CFR?
I think what resonated is that every foundation is looking for something different. And I think kind of having the institutional knowledge, like having a group like CFR to kind of connect us to people who have gotten those opportunities before is super valuable. So
Yeah.
thank you for that work.
And Paul, I'm not anti-pivot. It's just not my favorite tool because to this question's point, so CFR is a different kind of expertise, right? So I would say if you want to do that research on your own, and I encourage you to do it, pivot is the ideal starting point because it also captures all things federal. My problems with pivot are it is slow to add RFPs or funding opportunities that are time sensitive. So sometimes it gives you more of a historical picture. That's not a bad thing. And then it's federal, which I don't look at those. So that's why it's not my favorite tool.
So I'm sorry, Colleen, I got to say, Pivot covers multiple funder types,
Yes.
foundations,
Yes.
associations, et cetera.
It has everything.
Yeah, it pretty much does. Every time I talk to the company, I tell them that they're the largest aggregator of funding opportunities right at our fingertips. So please use it. The other thing I like is we have another database called Foundation Directory.
Yes.
That's really looking in the rear view mirror because it gets its data from tax returns. Tax returns are last year. What I like to do individually, I like to look in Foundation Directory for potential funders, then build a search for them in Pivot.
So in hearing you say that, I think I hope everyone's looking at like this person, Paul, he's got so much expertise. He's really good at the identification piece. And for anyone early career, identification is day one, step one. Paul is a great resource.
I guess I got to pay her now.
Yes. Yeah. Let's just call it even. More questions, John?
Yes, we do have a second question for Dr. Kwan. It asks, what is your process for researching a foundation? Do you look at their funding announcement, their overall goals, the people that are running it, the review committee?
All of the above. I would say, you know, when you've worked with one foundation, you know one foundation, and they all have little quirks. And some of these are not super obvious sometimes, even based on their website or previous grantees. So if there's an opportunity to speak with somebody who is either, you know, serve on the review panel for a foundation, for the foundation you're looking at, or have gotten a grant from them, it might be worth just sending an email or, seeing whether they can tell you a little bit more about them.
I have a quick add-on for that one, which is, if you don't know if anyone's ever been funded and you're applying for a foundation, those of us in CFR can tell you. Your grants administrator can probably get that information as well. But I have, I don't know how many times, reached out and made connections between faculty who are applying and faculty who have received awards. Over the years, I've worked on a number of grants that have been successfully funded, so it's pretty easy for me to call someone up who I've worked on the grant with and say, hey, would you mind helping out this person? But also we do that blind all the time because people want this community to be as positive and as successful as it can be.
And we have another question from one of our next panelists. So, Mr. Rich Rogel, you want to unmute yourself and ask directly?
Yes, I have a question. Every once in a while, I get a proposal from a group of faculty about a huge multidisciplinary project they would like to start. And this would be from different schools, et cetera. And I'm talking very large, $20 to $30 million projects. Who should they take that to? Because they have to structure. I get it structured as if it were a grant, and I know that's not good for foundations or to individuals or to companies. Who should they go to talk to about getting this proposal out there?
I have an answer for that. Does anyone else on the panel have an answer for that? Okay.
Yeah, I do. It's not my department, but I'm next door to them. I would say Jill Jividen for Bold Challenges at OVPR. This is precisely what they are aiming to do. So they want to facilitate these conversations. They want to help put together teams and ideate. They have seed funding, and then they want to help you go after large center and institute level. Now, they work primarily on federal grants, but a lot of that work is going to move you forward in ways that they can hand off to the CFR team.
I love that answer because it's a campus answer and not a Michigan medicine answer, and making it a campus issue is really smart. There are two people on the Michigan medicine side that beat David Miller and George Masher, because from the development office, when someone brings us, hey, we have this $30 million project, the first thing we're going to do is say, is this a Michigan medicine institutional priority? How much effort do we and support do we give to this? And working with the Office of Research is a great strategy because it changes the dynamic and the collaboration. And then Michigan Medicine can partner and support as well. Would anyone else answer that differently? Rich, thank you for your question, and I can't wait to hear from you later in the session.
Thank you.
Yes, so there was a question earlier about AI software that can help with finding grant mechanisms. So I use Undermine AI, and if you just take your aims and it's limited to 5,000 characters, so you can't put the whole specific aims in there, but aims 1 through 3 and a short introduction. And you can ask it to make you like a chart, the letter of intent, due date, when the actual due date. And if you're early stage, like it'll list early stage first because I am. So it gives you like the priority list. So Undermine AI is kind of a nice.
Undermine AI, thanks for that. Could you introduce yourself?
Gary Gerlach, Nephrology.
Thanks, Gary. Thanks. We're glad you're here. Do we have any more questions online right now, John? Okay. Any more questions in the audience? Katie has a question. Katie McGuinn, who's on the Corporate and Foundation Relations team.
I have a question because I think Ken has a lot of insight on this and I think can share with the audience because I think we as the CFR team often are articulating in different ways how you can position a proposal to a foundation and how that's different from the NIH. But when you're talking to colleagues, how do you phrase that? How is it different? what is important to foundations when you're thinking about applying, and how is that different from the NIH?
So I would say, so first thing, every foundation is a little bit different. Even though, like I'm really familiar with multiple autism foundations, and having worked with them, some of them are very narrowly focused on one aspect of autism. Some of them exclude specific aspects of autism. Some of them are very, very broad and can fund anything that's tangentially related to it. And so I didn't figure that out until I started reviewing for them and talking, like, not just, even if I can't imagine, even if I were to call up the program staff, they would tell me that. Like, it wasn't clear to me until I sat down with the rest of the review panel and then getting contribution from the program to say, okay, this is what we want to fund, until that's not an insight that I could have possibly had. So I would say if we don't have that connection, you just kind of have to read the website and see what other people have gone previously and kind of hope for the best. But with that connection, then you know a lot more. And so that's also partially why I do a lot of review work, because I get a lot of insights into how these foundations are working on the inside.
Review work is fantastic, and we have a couple of faculty members who are reviewers and sit on the board for the Gerber Foundation. They give us tremendous insight, and they really help us understand what the philosophy of the foundation is and what goes into their thinking. So Carl, I'm looking at you. We have 6 minutes left, and like I said, I'm landing this plane on time. Do we have, what's that? Brad has another question.
One quick question. In terms of foundations and where do you take your first shot on goal? Is it better to, or is it more, your chance of success better to go for a foundation that's very specific on a particular disease type? Foundation for Blindness, the American Cancer Society, versus more of a community-based altruistic foundation? Is there a difference in terms of where you're gonna have more success?
So if a faculty member comes to me in their very early career and they're a clinician researcher, clinical researcher, MD, PhD, I will show them the Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan Foundation and say these $10,000 awards, and the number has not gone up in 16 years. If you get one of these awards, this was, I think, David Miller's first award ever, first grant ever, right? And you can see that over and over again. Blue Cross Blue Shield, when they get these applications for these $10,000 awards, they always fund them. I don't know of anyone who's ever been turned down. Now, they have a larger award mechanism that are $75,000. Everyone wants the more money, the higher amount. This is not an honorific. This is a Michigan award. This is about where you are in your location. I would say do both. The association, like if you have a specific association, you want to go after their awards. You want to be known by them. You want to get all of their emails. You want to be a member. You've got to be a member to apply to them usually. Like you want to go after those hard, that's a no-brainer. But the regional awards, it's probably never going to be research with a few exceptions, like I said before. But if you can thread more of a programmatic needle or a project needle and be part of that, then it's a really interesting story to tell about yourself. So going back to the Michigan Health Endowment Fund, for all of those people who've gotten those awards, they tend to have more success, right? It's that Matthew principle, right? Yeah, it's that, but those awards in particular have been leading to national awards and bigger awards. It is kind of a tough needle to thread, that one, because it's not research. So closing comments in our last now 3 minutes. I had some questions for you, but what kind of takeaways would you want to leave our audience, our listeners with? Paul, I'm looking at you.
I think the most important thing you can do is be visible. Update your record in Michigan Research Experts. You probably have a profile in the database pivot. Be visible. If Melinda Gates comes along and tries to drop $100 million on you, do you know what you're going to do with it? Do you really have a budget that is going to explain what you're going to do with it? Because she'll walk away. Be visible and then be prepared to take the money. That's my big thing. And don't forget my name. Reach out anytime.
Thanks, Paul. Ken?
Make a calendar, find out the deadlines, and then learn to recycle and repackage your applications for the next one.
That's great advice. And Henry?
I think those are two good ones already. I gotta come up with a third thing. I'll just reiterate, let us know about your successes. We're here to amplify the impact of Michigan research by making sure that it gets out there. And so use the QR code that I put up there earlier, find our website, let us know about your successes. Let's figure out a strategy for you.
And for me, you get take shots on goal and don't give up. So with that, thanks again to my colleagues at FFMI. Thank you so much for your partnership over the years and on this particular event. We're grateful. Can I have a round of applause for my panelists? I'm very grateful to each of them for joining us today, as well as to you for listening. And it looks like Brad is back up and he is going to introduce Mike Renola.
Thank you, Colleen, and thank you to the panelists as well. Let's switch gears here substantially away from the nonprofit sector and to a sector that's very much for profit, the pharmaceutical industry, the device industry. And I'm going to introduce my next speaker here, Mike Ranella, who heads up our business development function for the medical school. He connects faculty members with potential dollars, potential funders from industry, and he can tell you how best to navigate that. Maybe you've been to a national meeting, you made a platform presentation and somebody from industry gives you their card, wants to talk further. You're not sure where to go next. This is where you go next. So, Mike.
Thanks, Brad. Appreciate it. So can I get started or should we wait a second? Oh. All right. Can I get the presentation? All right, as we get that started, maybe really quickly, one question I'll ask the audience. So how many of you have had industry-sponsored research as part of your experience as investigators here? Okay, pretty good. All right, let's flip the question around then. Let's show of hands. How many of you want to work with industry, do industry-sponsored research, haven't yet done it? Yes, excellent. Okay, you're in the right spot. If you haven't raised your hand, we're going to talk about industry sponsorships for the next couple of minutes here. Oh, are you setting that up? This looks good, I think. Oh, okay, sorry, 1 sec. We're going to get it so our virtual teams can see it too. Okay, so maybe I'll just click on that. Great. Okay, thank you. So I'll be talking about, let me see where we're at here. So industry funding, okay, here we go. So today I'm going to talk about exploring how to find win-win partnerships with industry. We're going to talk about what works, what doesn't, how researchers can expand their funding beyond the horizons of the NIH funding. I want to set expectations for the next hour plus. So first I'm going to do a quick presentation. I want to lay down some foundational principles. And then from there, I've got two experts that's going to join me up on stage here as panelists who are going to share their perspectives, give practical advice to the audience, and then we'll take questions as well from you too as well. So as you've heard, I'm part of the FFMI program, which is based in the Med School's Office of Research. And we have 3 different service lines that help support med school faculty. I want to thank Catherine and John from our ComEd team. They've helped set this up, and then Brad and Carl for their leadership and support of putting this event on today. I'm Mike Cardone, I'm the Senior Director of Business Development, and we help support our med faculty. And you can think of us as the group that's going to interface between academia and industry on collaborations. Our goal is to create productive interactions that are both win-win for research faculty and for the industry partner that we're working with. We do this by having an excellent team of dynamic members. We've got Amelia Metrikeska, Shelby Unsworth, and Ingrid Chemo, who have built expertise, depth of knowledge, and have expertise in disease areas across the entire market. They provide dedicated support to researchers, as well as have crossover coverage in different areas across the med school in Michigan medicine. Our expertise doesn't fall just into disease spaces. We understand different deal types. So for instance, we have expertise in clinical trials. We have digital medicine experience, if you will, data and material transfers as well. The goal is, though, is we want to help create interactions that are productive by building our knowledge of the market. There are 2 market segments that I'm going to talk about. The internal one, which is you, the university researcher. We want to understand where the strength lies, what you can do. And what we're also doing is going out into the world, into the external market where companies lie. This is where we want to understand what's the market forces, what is industry trying to get done. That way we have knowledge of both markets and we can help collaborations and facilitate partnerships. So really quickly, business development service line, like why have it even? Research is a competitive sport, right? Getting funding is something that is competitive. Federal funding in particular is the largest contributor to academic centers. Federal support for research is declining. It's also uncertain at this time. So it's becoming more and more competitive. More academic researchers are looking for alternative funding sources. So for academic research centers to continue to succeed in the future, diversification of funding sources provides the best approach to sustainability. Think of it like investing in your portfolio for finances. You don't put all of your money into one account. You look to diversify so then that way you have consistent, secured, sustainable future. Okay, so I'm going to share quickly my philosophy on how we go about working with industry and with our academic researchers. There are many challenges that you need to overcome when industry and academic researchers are trying to work together. I give the example of this is a huge organization. We have experts that have domains that are deep in experience, and what we want to try and do is match make and identify researchers that companies are looking to work with. That's one way that we can help. Same thing on the other side. I have a really good idea. I want a drug from potentially a company. We can get you access to those individuals so then that way they can talk to you about that. How about another challenge is a lot of times we know what the problem is. It's how we go about solving it, right? I'll just jokingly say cancer is bad. How do you build a new drug for it? It's how you build a new drug for it that can be challenging. So part of the thing that our team is really good at doing is facilitating discussions, creating alignment, so in that way you can put in place actionable, potentially sponsored type of activities between sponsor and the researcher. That's win-win. How about lack of experience? So I get a lot of, and we've got some in the audience that says they'd like to work with industry but haven't done it before. What do I do? I'm not exactly sure what's the next step. I'm talking to a company, but what do I do? We want to provide guidance and education, decrease the learning curve. Once you know what you're doing, you can start down the path quickly to get to some sort of contract agreement and working with the company. Working at the pace of business. Is U of M fast at anything? I think everybody at some point says we're slow, right? That's the reality is that we may be perceived as slow. When you look at it from the company's perspective, they want it right now, here and now. We help try and align and facilitate around what reasonable timelines are and be competitive. That's actually part of the name of the game here on this one. So this is some of the things we help support. Overall, I'm looking at this as 2 teams working together, and is it the right fit? What does that mean? So it could be that the science must align, finances, IP terms, contract language, rights to publish, let's say. I'm looking that these teams can work together. There's standard agreements that we can agree to, but No two deals really are the same. At times, the work that we're doing needs to have creative discussions around it to make the collaboration work. So both teams have to be amenable. Does the work that we're doing have meaning, right? Is it going to move the needle? And then also common goals around philosophy and operations. So really quickly, I tell this to my team all the time, and anybody that's worked with me in the past, no is a perfectly good answer. The goal is not to deal and get a deal done on every single project. We have to align. You have to like working with the group that you're on with. So if it's with an industry partner that's offering you $20 million and you can't stand doing it, it might not be the best approach to do this with them. Okay. There's performance measures behind it, and I'll talk more about that later. No is a perfectly good answer. A deal never made sometimes is the best deal done. That's what I like to say. So faculty, you're our main customer. We leverage our deep knowledge and connections to the internal services inside the university through ORSP for contract negotiations, let's say, innovation partnerships for IP protections, CRA for their network contacts with industry, to accelerate and promote an environment for deal making with industry. We also leverage our industry networks across different market segments to make connections and drive opportunities into U of M for assessment. We have long-standing relationships with many of the companies that I've got on the slide here, as well as many more. We have regular cadence communication meetings with them so that we can discuss how UM can partner and pursue strategic goals together. Okay, so for any relationship to be win-win, you have to consider the viewpoint of your dance partner, which in this case is industry. So at a high level, the value proposition for industry working with academia is that we're creating a product that they want. To get that product, you have to balance time it takes to get it and the cost in which it is to deliver it. So you can almost come up with a simple formula, right? Where the value is the product minus time plus money. Success is the value of the product, right? In which they'll be willing, potentially if it's high value product, they'll wait a longer time to get it, or they may be willing to pay more to get that product. But it's measured on actual outcomes and a return on that money and time that they're waiting to get that product, not solely on scientific advancement. A lateral federal funding, part of the basis, the cornerstone of a good project and funding is to expand the science. Yes, that is important with industry, but what does that $1 million get me is a question back that you should be able to answer. Okay, so we talk about the value of what industry is looking for, but what does good look like? So industry values, when you're talking about project initiation, that your customer focus, willing to negotiate, and your fast turnaround times are there. So they send an email out and 2 weeks later you respond to it. And you're like, sorry, I had an NIH deadline I had to get done first, now I'm ready. That's not customer focus. That's not necessarily timely. You want to be able to move fast if you can and respond. Performance, we're looking at meeting and exceeding expectations once we set out working together. And then the output on your data is audit ready and clean and can be usable. If you can meet and exceed these values, you're good. It creates a virtuous circle. And a virtuous circle, that concept just simply means that if you're good at what you're doing, people want to come back and work with you again. That's human nature. Everybody that's worked with great people, you get new projects, you come back and you work with them again. Similar type of experience here too as well. So I'm going to quickly talk through, our team does more than just sponsored research working with industry. Part of the tripartite mission is research, education, and healthcare. So we work with industry and partner with them too around some of our educational programming, as well as our healthcare in terms of selling healthcare services and working together as a vendor relationship. Today, I'm going to focus in and really highlight some of the research opportunities that I'd like you guys to be aware of. Number one, consulting. You can do it. I've heard this many times. I'm not allowed to consult. That's a conflict. That's not necessarily true. What are we agreeing to? So I want to just emphasize it's allowed. If you have questions, come talk to me and the team. Regulatory affairs helps manage conflicts of interest. What that is you are the key opinion leader. You're providing analysis and recommendation directly to the company. Your know-how is what they want. It can be either in the form of a contract where outside of your employment, you can do this one-on-one with the company, or we can run it through the university. But definitely consider doing that. If you can meet and exceed expectations, think of it as a knock-on effect of that virtuous cycle I was talking about, which is you show that you know what you're doing, they love working with you. Guess what? Now they have sponsored research that they've got to continue to refine. Who are they going to ask first? You. Okay, sponsored research. This is kind of that classic scholarly activity. A lot of times what we'll do is we'll have conversations. We start to align and put together what's called a statement of work, deliverables. I'm going to do this, you're going to do that. I'm going to do this, you're going to give me that. Once we have that written out, you can then put together a budget with milestones. Again, you're building the product and then the time and cost it's going to take to deliver on that product. Once we've agreed, we can execute through ORSP and we can get started on the project. Next is a type of research deal that's through other sponsored activities, OSA, and a very specific type of transactional deal called fee for service. So in this situation, there's not necessarily scholarly work going on. There's no publication or necessarily IP rights to be discussed in terms of foreground IP. In this situation, it's here, run the set of experiments for me. I'll pay for it and give me the results back and go away. It can be kind of as simple as that in terms of transactional. The type of workflow is the same. Align on what we're doing, put together a statement of work, budget and milestones, and then contract execute and then deliver on that. I had invited one other panelist today. He's a basic scientist, Randy Seeley, to join us. Unfortunately, he's flying right now in the air, but I did capture just really quickly, 10 seconds, his thoughts on how fee for service has impacted his work with industry partners. So hopefully this goes.
My name is Randy Seeley. I'm a professor in the Department of Surgery and the director of the Michigan Nutrition Obesity Research Center. And we have often used fee-for-service contracts with companies to do a couple of things. One, it helps you diversify your economy. The second thing is building relationships with these companies helps you build deeper collaborative projects for later on.
Great, thank you, Randy. He's a good example of, he started with fee-for-service opportunities working with companies, and then it's led to other opportunities, both from consulting, sponsored research activities in his lab that have academic benefit to him. One other one I'll talk about quickly too is clinical trials. This is by far the largest book of business when it comes to industry-sponsored work within the med school and the Office of Research. I've got one of our expert panelists, Najira Logogo, that's going to be able to talk more about this too as well. But very quickly, clinical trials, there's kind of two different forms you can pick up from. One is the design protocol from the company and their asset, in which we're a participating site. What a lot of times our team can help with is bring in those company representatives to talk about the pipeline of late assets that they're bringing to clinical trials. And from there, we can kind of game plan ahead of time what trials we would like to participate on, kind of extend the runway back before we really get started with them when they're site selecting. Additionally, IITs, that's investigator-initiated trials or investigator-sponsored research. You, the investigator, have come up with the idea, and what we're looking for is sponsorship or support from industry. There's a couple of different ways you can capitalize on IITs in working with companies. One is classically sponsored research, the cost of doing the work, they can help sponsor that. But how about maybe you have some internal grant funding or you've already gotten alternative sources of funding, and really what you need at this point is, say, no cost study drug and placebo, or a discount on some of the other technologies that they have, be it device or diagnostic testing. These are all things that we can help support and we want to help drive forward with. The goal being here for a second is even if you get part of the partnership, that's perfect. Now they're aware. And again, it shows what you can do and it builds again, potentially, if you can exceed on expectations, that virtuous cycle that I was talking about. We have lots of strategic partnerships going in this space too as well. And I've got a colleague of mine, Thomas, that's going to be down here from Genentech to talk with us on the panel as well here shortly. So holistically, for just a quick second, what's the project type, pipeline look like, at least when working with industry? If you're a researcher talking to a company, you can contact my office, and what we'll do is we'll sit down, we'll have a conversation with the company, we start to align on what it is that we want to do. From there, we put in writing a statement of work that outlines those deliverables I was just talking about. And then once we have deliverables, we can then frame out what the cost is through budgeting and milestone-based deliverables of what we're going to give out there. We negotiate, and once we've agreed, we can then get it over to our legal teams for execution through the system. And once the contract is signed, we can get the project started and moving. All right, very quickly, how do you find industry partners, especially for those that haven't done it before? So I'll say this really quickly. You're the talent, industry wants to work with you. You're the reason why they're here in the first place. So don't underestimate that. They want to talk to you and work with you. When you're at professional conferences and you're having that big presentation and afterwards people come up to you and they're like, hey, I'd love your science. What is, want to talk to you more. And they're from a company. That's your great opportunity to continue to engage, right? And potentially ask them, what are they looking for? What would you like to work with me on? Our team can help coach you if you are anticipating those type of opportunities to get you prepared to be able to have those conversations. How about other contacts, other scholars that you're working with in the past that are then connecting you? Same thing with you're a public person and you're publishing all the time. Companies are going to reach out. If they see the science that you're doing is great or that they're interested in, they're going to reach out to you. My emphasis is going to be respond. Don't wait so long to get back to them. There's always networking opportunities. And even if it's not within sponsored research opportunities with industry, my colleagues that we've been talking about today, success adds to success too as well. So always take those networking opportunities. You may think that you're talking about something in foundations, but right away there's somebody that's working with a company in that foundation that they want to connect you with. There's the opportunities. I've had that happen before many times. When you're talking with the company, I heard the panel talk about this at the very end too as well. If you're thinking of talking and having an industry partner sponsor with you or sponsor your research, one thing to think about is it from their perspective, what are they getting out of it? And how do you uniquely have expertise and capabilities that they want? Okay. So where does your strengths and the company's strengths within the market lie? Can you deliver something from an outcome perspective that you have that companies want to partner with you on? Just saying I want $1 million to do my research, the question back, people ask me that sometimes, like, hey, can you connect me with BMS? I have $1 million project I want them to fund. What are they getting for $1 million? Is like the natural question, and they just look at me. Be prepared to think about what is it that you're doing in the science that lines up with them. They may want to put $2 million on that project now. It goes back to the calculation of product, time, money, the value that they're talking about here. Another way to be found is through our FFMI Collaborator Hub. We have a survey that we ask that our faculty that want to work with industry, they can fill this out. It's industry facing. This is a search engine. We send a lot of our industry partners right to this website. They can click on it and basically they can find you. It's very specific in terms of what your interests are. It's not like PubMed or Michigan Experts, which are grants and publications. These are lagging indicators. These are really specific targeted approaches. So if you've got questions and you want to be seen by industry, this is a great way to boost profile as well too. There's always self-help tools too as well. Like, you know, today you don't have a consulting opportunity, but 2 weeks from now, someone's approaching you, they want to do some consulting. I don't remember what to do. I don't want to talk to Mike. Jump on the website. We have little video vignettes that explain exactly what you should be thinking about, the 4 aspects and elements of consulting. The last thing I'll leave you with is that there's a lot of different opportunities in which you can get resources here to really help enhance and work with industry sponsors. In conclusion, I'll just quickly say that industry is a possibility for diversifying and strengthening research portfolios. It's just like investing where you go into different areas to strengthen your portfolio overall rather than just one place. A lot of this is on you, the researcher, and it's based on performance and also on aligning your strengths with what the company is looking for. Keys to success, clear communication and trust. You meet and exceed working expectations, and you have this collaborative approach to anything you're working on with companies. I think if you can hit those successes, it creates a virtuous cycle that builds upon itself. Okay. That I am done. And can I invite my panelists up here? Or anything else? Okay, so I'll ask my 2 colleagues to join me, Thomas and Najira. You got that? Okay. So very quickly, I'll just say that Thomas Uran is from Genentech. He's the Genentech Med Affairs Executive Director for the Michigan ecosystem. Good friend of mine. He's and I have worked for many years now, probably 6-7 years. Najira Lagogo, she's the Associate Professor of Internal Medicine in the Division of Pulmonary and Critical Care Medicine and the Asthma Program Director. Again, known her for a long time too as well, an excellent clinical trialist. So. Can you guys hear it? Yeah? Okay, excellent. I'll scoot over to this.
Sit here.
Get the feng shui on. There we go. Excellent. So let's start here, we'll start with you. We'll do a quick introduction and what makes industry partnership, oh no, excuse me, and your background on working with industry partners.
Okay. I'm a professor in internal medicine, pulmonary and critical care medicine. My area of expertise is asthma. And I've worked with industry in a variety of ways. I think I checked almost every box up there. Consulting, investigator-initiated studies, a very large clinical trial portfolio, and now venturing into other sorts of opportunities like CME, education, and funding for projects to increase clinical trial participation. And so that's really what I've spent my time doing.
Excellent. Thank you. Thomas?
Yeah, sure. Well, thanks for having me. I'm Thomas Duran. I have spent time working in academic research centers throughout my career. I am a pharmacist by training and have found my way into the pharmaceutical industry where I have spent the predominance of my expertise. I work in a unit called medical affairs. And so in the world of scientific research, there's the early clinical development area, there's the medical affairs piece, and then there's more of the commercialization of a product. And so I span a pretty big expanse of opportunities and having had the opportunity to work with different kinds of researchers over my career. I am local. I am here in Michigan. I have been with the industry for more years than I can count, but it's been a while. The other thing I would say is I'm not necessarily speaking today on Genentech. I'm speaking more from my experience that I've acquired over my professional career. I'm looking forward to answering questions and having our further discussion. And Mike and Dr. Legault, thanks for having me.
Thank you, Thomas. Yeah. So let's start with, from your perspective, Najira, what makes a good academic industry partnership kind of that win-win? Maybe give a real example too, if you have one.
Yeah, I think like anything else, you need to both understand what you're bringing to the table, what your value is, and then what the intentions or the needs of the industry partner is. So when I was much younger, I would have this brilliant idea and I would try to pitch it. And oftentimes it had nothing to do with the product they had or the pipeline or their area of interest. And, you know, we've all done that. Maybe you had a mentor and they were studying a particular thing, and then you came in with your idea, which has nothing to do with that, and you're wanting all this support and no concept really of synergy. And so I would say that, you know, being in the room, talking to people, listening more than talking most of the time, gives you an idea of the gaps. And what I will tell you is that industry often has they have the ability to produce a lot of new therapies and things like that, but they don't have the patient population and they don't have the clinical insights. Sometimes they have a lot of assets and a lot of capabilities on the basic science side, but maybe you have a particular expertise or technical information that might be quite invaluable to them in understanding how these things are connected. So you have to understand what's your own unique contribution. Then you have to understand what their unique needs are. You know, what does their pipeline look like? What product do they have? What are the gaps in care or unanswered questions? And how are you uniquely positioned to help them answer those things? And so really understanding that is quite important. And I would preface all this, I mean, I think when I was sitting there, I was thinking about one of the hurdles that I think most faculty have is this idea that industry is the group you don't engage with if you're pure. So there's a purity test. There's kind of like, I don't talk to those people, you know, I'm the pure one. And you know, I think that's a fallacy. Now, certainly that came from the days when people were being taken to golf courses and eating steak dinners and all that. And so, you know, the pure ones didn't eat the steak dinners and go to the golf courses, but it's become a little bit out of control in that now there are people who believe that any conversation with an industry partner is somehow going to taint their reputation. And so there's a real hesitancy actually to engage with industry. And it's a missed opportunity because when I'm in the room talking to these partners, I mean, honestly, they want to sell a product ultimately, but they do want to move things on. And in many ways, as an academic provider taking care of asthma patients, I'm never going to discover a drug and bring it to market as an individual, but I can help them shape a clinical trial that's more generalizable, more feasible. They get it done, we get an answer. And 2 years from now, I'm prescribing that medication to my patient. So I think clinicians particularly need a paradigm shift. And maybe that's the biggest hurdle to engaging with industry is your own reticence to engage with industry. And a lot of the people in industry are well-renowned pharmacists, clinicians, physicians, people who spent careers taking care of patients, and they really are our colleagues and our partners. They just have a different hat on. So that's my take. I don't know if you have comments about that particular thing, but I hear that enough times that I think it warrants airing out, that you can work with industry and not be tainted in any way. I think I'm testament to that. And it can be quite a successful, synergistic relationship.
Yeah, Dr. Lugogo, thank you for your comments. Agree wholeheartedly. I guess what I would say is think about it from the perspective of sort of what's in it for me, what's in it for you, what's in it for us, right? And so you think about academic researchers, you think about the work that you do in cutting edge science and technologies, that is of value to the pharmaceutical industry, right? So what would you get out of some kind of partnership in that capacity, right? Pharmaceutical industry is a specialist at bringing products to market, and that is a very complicated, time-consuming approach. So from an academic researcher's perspective, maybe there are different molecules that you're able to engage with. Maybe there are different technologies that you don't have at your fingertips that the industry does. Maybe it's different libraries that don't exist here that exist in other places, right? Maybe it's just simply the understanding of the regulatory process if you have enough work that's already been done to bring a product or a molecule forward, right? Maybe it's the commercialization of that product, right? So I think from an industry perspective, it's about what is it that's in it for you as an academic researcher, right? But I also think it's also important to understand what's in it from the pharmaceutical industry. And that is working with institutions like University of Michigan that have cutting edge science. I think that's very important. So there is an opportunity to think about holistically, what does that look like? And what's the appropriate engagement and arrangement, right? At the end of the day, it's somewhat very simple. And it really is simple in the respect that it's about the science and the hope that that science has for the future. Okay. It's a real simple concept, but it takes a lot of time. It takes a mindset. The other thing I would say with regard to sort of these relationships between industry and academia is think about what good looks like. Think about what the end looks like, right? As an academic researcher, what are you trying to solve for? Where are you trying to go? What is your vision? Where are you trying to take your work, right? And is it to commercialize a product, or you develop a disease state along the way and you find different targets for it? So I think having those conversations and understanding that the industry is there to help and support, and actually it's a need for us, right? I mean, we don't really do a lot of the benchtop cutting edge science, okay? We do some, but not all of it. The vast majority of it comes from fine academic institutions such as University of Michigan and others, right? So I think it's a partnership, it's a discussion, and it's begin to think about what your investment is and how you want to engage if you choose to engage. I hope you will engage. It's at least worth a conversation.
Great answer, guys. I appreciate it. So I feel like we coordinated on our talks here ahead of time. Nice. And I'm curious too as well. I mean, so especially folks that have not worked with industry, maybe just kind of off the cuff here for a second. How do they know what industry wants? Like if they're talking to a company or whatever, is that on them? Can they just ask the question in terms of what's important to companies, let's say, or where do they fit into their expertise and with this relationship?
Yeah, absolutely, Mike. I think asking questions is a good way to go. You know, I think you had a slide up here earlier where you're talking about connecting at conferences and presentations and those kinds of things. You know, it's real easy for industry to bring scientists to the floors of convention centers, right? And they have a little booth off to the side. It's always an easy way to have a conversation. You can talk to industry individuals. Usually it's in the medical side. There's what they call MSLs for each company that are in a region. They're medical science liaisons. They're a good point of contact to get connected within the industry. Honestly, your industry colleagues across the board. I mean, we know lots of people. Just because I work at Genentech Roche doesn't mean I don't have colleagues that work at other companies, right? So yes, just simply asking the question. I think the other thing you can do is do a little homework, right? I mean, look at LinkedIn, start Googling some things around capacities and science and things that you're interested in, seeing what names come up, right? I think honestly, Dr. Lugogo, Mike, I see Amelia in the back. They have connections. They can help you frame your questions appropriately, help give you some insight of where to go. I think there's a myriad of ways to figure out if what you do has a resonance with the pharmaceutical industry and which pharmaceutical company, right? We're not all in oncology. We're not all in neurology, right? So thinking about your expertise with kind of work that you're working on, think about looking at company reports, right? Going to their website. You know, a good way to get insight without even knowing anybody from the company is looking at their yearly report. They have products listed. They have therapeutic areas that they're after. That tells you where they're going for their future, right? So I think these are some ways to think about just engaging with the pharmaceutical industry, just to have a conversation to begin to understand what's important.
Thank you very much. Nigeria, this question's for you. So what resources or internal teams should researchers involve early to set up a collaboration for success with industry?
If it's clinical trials, there's very good clinical trial infrastructure at the university. So often, if you want to do clinical trials, now, if you've never done clinical trials and you need to open the door, I think partnering with the CTSU or FFMI and saying, hey, I have this unique patient population. In my case, it's initially the severe refractory asthma population, where my go-to patients. And I could go to one of them and say, I have this unique patient population. I think they would be eligible for clinical research studies. You may or may not have clinical trial experience. If you don't have clinical trial experience, it's a slightly higher bar because the companies are often looking for people with experience, but maybe you can argue that I have this other person in my division who's done a lot of clinical trials. They'll mentor me, they'll be available. And so you would go to one of the groups and say, I'm interested. That's one way because they have all those industry partnerships. So for example, a lot of companies and actually clinical research organizations come through the CTSU and say, hey, we have an asthma study. And in the past, if they didn't know about me, it would come to me that way. You get an email that says, hey, fill out this feasibility questionnaire. Are you interested in participating? Sometimes the questionnaire comes straight to me. Then I submit it. There's a formal process to submit these feasibility. We do the feasibility questionnaire and then we submit some documents formally through the system so that we start the engines going. And those are really the two ways. And then I will tell you, you have to be a bit opportunistic. So I'll give you a couple of examples. I'm an asthma researcher. I'm not a vaccine researcher. But in 2020, when COVID hit, I had the technical skills, I guess, to do clinical trials. I had a team. I had no vaccine research experience, but the Johnson and Johnson came to U of M and AstraZeneca and said, hey, we have COVID vaccine trials. They were looking for sites. They needed to enroll 35,000 patients. So they came to the university and asked if anyone is interested. And I was in many conversations where other faculty said, I'm interested, but I just want to help. Because it was going to be ridiculously difficult to enroll 500 patients in 6 weeks. I had never done that. My asthma trials maybe get 3-4 patients a year. But all of a sudden, it just literally fell in our laps. And so we partnered with FFMI and the CTSU and all the people at the university and said, we have to do this because as a country, we need this. We need a vaccine. So there are like compelling reasons to do this. There was all of us were feeling very helpless. I wasn't working in ICU, and I felt like I needed to do something. And so I thought, well, I have the expertise. I've never done something this big, but I'll just extrapolate my expertise and try to see what I can do. And indeed, we started up 2 clinical trials. Our startup timeline was 3 weeks. I'll never forget, from the beginning to first subject in 3 weeks. And we had to hire 17 people, and it was like a machine. We were doing 6 patients an hour. We had to like create a whole infrastructure, but everybody worked together to make it happen. And then I had now acquired a new skill set, which is somewhat low complexity, high volume trials. So then a few years ago, I was approached about a lung cancer screening study where they're looking at, multi-detector cancer study to see if we can find a way to detect cancer early. And I'm not a lung cancer doctor, I'm aware of the area. People who are being screened for lung cancer are not oncology patients, so they don't live in oncology. They live in the general medicine and pulmonary. So I took on a study in a totally different area. We managed to, enroll 250 patients in that study. So now I have a skill set that I'm willing to transfer to different diseases that it may or may not be directly related to asthma. So you have to also be a bit courageous and take advantage of opportunities that fall in your lap, even when they seem a bit out of left field, maybe out of reach, because in that case, they can connect you to somebody else. Like Mike might say, hey, Sachin Kadapal did this Apple Watch study where they enrolled thousands of patients in a very short period of time. So maybe they can help you, and you can hop on a call and they'll tell you how did they operationalize that thing. And so I think that kind of courage to say, well, I'm going to do it, raise your hand. They'll connect you to some other people that might be able to help you, operationalize some of the more complex pieces. So I think at Michigan, we are very, very lucky because we have very many well-oiled machines. We sometimes don't even know the cogs are moving in different areas, but we have some people in the middle who are aware of what's happening and they can direct you one way or the other.
Can I, Dr. Lugo, can I add to that for a second? So for the aspiring researchers that want to get involved in clinical trials, there is a journey, and we can probably talk about that offline, but one of the easier ways to begin to get involved in doing clinical trial research is becoming a co-PI, right? So you could potentially work with Dr. Lugogo as a co-PI, and then you get exposure to what that rigor looks like. You get exposure to sort of the requests from the industry. You get an exposure to the process. You get an intimate understanding and a learning environment to move forward and determine if that is something you truly want to do with your career, okay? The other thing I would say is the individual researcher is key, but it's not the only thing. You could be the best researcher in the world. If you don't have the team, if you don't have the resources from a fine institution like University of Michigan, it becomes somewhat troublesome, okay? Because there's a lot of work that goes behind the scenes, and you need a really good team that has good operations to help assist with that. So there are ways to get into doing that kind of work if that's a chosen field of desire.
Thank you both. I appreciate that. Really quickly, let's open up to the audience here and maybe virtual too as well. Are there any questions from the audience?
Hi, and thank you again for joining us. These 2 questions come again from the virtual audience. The first one is about indirect rates. So it says, the process of setting up indirect rates with industry appears to be not very well understood. It might be 29%, 56%, but what are the concrete and specific criteria used by the med school to decide this?
The indirect.
Oh, indirect. Okay, so I think I'll take some of that question. And very quickly, it's not the med school that necessarily sets just the indirects. This is institution-wide. It's based on the research work that's going on. We have our grants team too here too as well that can give you explicit information that's on the website. But let me share best practices because that's a very nebulous question. It's based on the work itself that's going on. And based on that work, you categorically assign it to either like on-campus sponsored research, which is a certain indirect rate, 56%. If it's other sponsored activities, OSA, it's not 29% now, it's just recently changed to 31% actually. That's dictated again based on the work. So if you have questions and you're in the med school, and Gina, I know you're here, so I'm gonna call on you and you can correct me and come up if you want to answer, but you can ask. Part of this is before we go talking to the companies, if there's a question on what indirect rate is, that significantly impacts. That's about a 27% increase or decrease in the budget, which, as we know, is really important in terms of negotiations. So my advice would be is if you've got that statement of work put together and we're not absolutely clear on what the indirect rate is, we can reach out to our grants office to help get what that exact indirect rate, that research categorization, which would then be the subsequent indirect rate. In general, clinical trials, and I think it actually explicitly states this, a clinical trial is considered OSA, and that's probably the crystal clearest one.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Ruda online. Ruda, I'm going to unmute you.
I didn't.
Okay, we'll try again in a bit. Continue on, Mike, with your questions.
Okay, that's it with, okay. For now.
Okay.
Got it, sorry. Okay, thank you from the people online asking questions. Thomas, I have a question for you. Kind of a hard one. So how is industry's view of partnerships evolving with academics? Are they looking for different things now than they were 5 years ago?
So I guess a couple things. When I think about the question, I think first of all, understand that the relationship between the pharmaceutical industry and academics has traditionally always been there, right? We don't necessarily do the cutting edge research per se. So we need fine institutions that continue to do that work, okay? The other thing that I would say is, yes, it is evolving, okay? So it's been a platform of need and desire, but how is it evolving then? So if you think about today's pharmaceutical manufacturing, you think about their machinery that produces the advent of a product that can be used in patients. That machinery across the industry, generally speaking, is well-oiled, fine-tuned. It's like an Indy car ready to go, and everybody's Indy car is just as good as everybody else's Indy car, okay? The only difference is some manufacturers are more interested in neurology versus oncology versus immunology, and so that's really the difference, okay? But that fine-tuned machinery that produces that output, now industry is looking for opportunities that can allow it to do it even faster. So it's really hard to take a car that fast and make it faster. What you look to is you try to find industry partnerships that allow you to work within cutting edge science. And the difference between then and now is not that then it was more transactional, right? Now it's more of trying to more morph into a collaboration, right? So it's not that we come together for just X, Y, and Z, and now we separate, and so now we're going to go off to some other lab, right? It's about how do you continue to engage in like what's next, okay? The other thing that I would say about the evolution of these arrangements is related to technologies themselves. And what I mean by that, are you think about the cellular therapies that are being created to be used in humans to alleviate disease. You think about gene therapy. There used to be a time in the industry where receptors were simple. We either blocked them because we didn't want certain actions to happen, or we bound to them and we wanted certain things to happen, we expedited it. Now there's technologies that say, we're just going to chew up that receptor and get rid of it, okay? So that technology is of value to the pharmaceutical industry because it's cutting edge, it's evolving, and it's a different platform to produce molecules to alleviate disease and treat pain and suffering, okay? So those two aspects alone have helped evolve what's going on from an industry perspective and how to continue to engage with academic researchers.
Can I ask you a
Sure.
question or maybe make a comment? What I've noticed as well is that it used to be there were certain very large companies that were the main companies, but I've noticed a lot of startup companies now that are focused sometimes on just one, for example, in the asthma space, there's a target. Okay, we are targeting TSLP. And so these, the large companies developed this target. They went all the way to, wow, we got a drug and now it's on the market. Well, now there might be 4 small biotechnology startup companies that basically crowdsource $1 billion, $2 billion, and they're like, hey, we have this technology to take that same target, and now we're going to make it a longer acting molecule, and we're going to do our own clinical trials. So for me personally, what I've noticed in the last few years is that a lot of the reach out, now it may be that I wasn't at the level where these companies were engaging with me before, but now I've noticed a lot of the reach out is small biotechnology firms that may not have, they have a molecule, they have the technological capacity to develop the molecule, they've crowdsourced the money, but they work like venture capitalists. They want to turn it around fast, but they don't have the, such and such company, I've done asthma trials for the last 25 years. I know all the nuances of writing the best protocol that's the most feasible. And so when they're engaging with people like me, it's, hey, we need to design the best, most optimal trial because we want to get this done fast. And it's quite different engaging with those small companies compared to, is it just my perception because my engagement has changed a little bit? Or is there really, with technological advancement, way more small companies and startups and groups like that that are breaking into biotechnology and drug development? And I think many of these want to develop the drug, and then at the end they sell it to the big company and for billions of dollars, and they cash out. And so they have a very different philosophy. It's quite interesting working with them, but I don't know if this is a true change or just a perception on my part.
So actually, I think there is a true change. And why I say that is for a couple reasons. Venture capital has come to the pharmaceutical industry, to be quite frank. And it's been known for a long time that every aspect of the pharmaceutical industry can be contracted out. Every bit of it. From cleaning the floors to the CEO that runs and makes the final decisions. Okay. So there are opportunistic events that happen in the pharmaceutical industry. So you see a lot more startups coming to fruition, but they have a very different strategy and focus. As you mentioned, quick, realistic, down and dirty. I need results. Many, many times, especially in oncology, there are a lot of those companies that come to market that have a unique mechanism of action, a unique avenue, and they really need support to understand how to get some of that data out there, right? Most of those companies generally are not in the business of bringing that product to commercialization. Okay, just to be clear, some can, some will, and some have that vision. It is a very different story taking research, getting a positive study or 2 or 3, and then trying to commercialize that product in the marketplace. Okay, so even venture capital to a certain degree will say, all right, we're in for this one because it makes sense and we think we have an opportunity to commercialize it. Okay. Others will say our strategy is to get it to phase 2, or better yet, let's get a great phase 1 study out there or 2. Let's see what kind of information it drums up, and let's go ahead and unload the product in the company at that time. So it depends on where they're going, what their philosophy is. It's neither right nor wrong. At the end of the day, patients need products. Physicians need unique products to treat, right? So I think it's a welcomed opportunity within the industry. Just realize that they have different pressures to actually perform.
Yeah.
And I will tell you, I have colleagues that have worked for some of these companies. And as soon as they find out that that study didn't work, they abandon ship and shuttle, because there is a lot of opportunities along the way that have not made it. Even if you have good studies, even if they work in phase one, they may not work in phase two or phase three. So I commend them from doing it because, you know, this is a lot of work, people, right? I mean, lifting products out of the ground, the cutting edge science, trying to commercialize it, it takes an entire community to do it.
Yeah.
It's a big lift and it takes years. So yes, I do believe technology has helped aid them, but I also think as science has progressed, they've been finding new ways to actually work and can do what they can with their vision of what they're trying to do as a company.
Great question. Thank you. I think we have one in the audience too.
Alvaro Rojas, Department of Surgery, Director of the ECMO Lab. First, thank you for putting this together. The question goes more as, what is the institution really doing for the investigators that maybe are able to do partnership with industry? And I would say there are two big groups, as you guys discussed recently, those startup small companies, but then the big global companies, right? And they move at different pace. And one of the struggles is when we have to have an NDA, who can help us to move an NDA really quick? Because that's how they move. Second, the legal side. You have your NDA, then you can discuss, you can plan, you can have everything. And a company has their own legal team, university has their own legal team, and the investigators in the middle, and we don't have the time to do it. So what is really the institution offering to us as the investigators? We want to move this one because we have the skills or the some of the technology to do it. Are we able to get locations where there are templates? Should we just partner with our office of research, our specific, senior administrators? Hopefully not during a funding season, because then we're gonna be stuck.
Yeah.
They don't have priority. So what we can get really from the institution, you wanna go to this approach?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's actually a very well-oiled machine. And I think it's a testament to how big the institution is that you don't actually have that knowledge that, I mean, nobody has provided you with the information. And that's the purpose of something like this. Because actually, for example, if it's a clinical trial, there's an intake form, you submit it, and then lo and behold, there's a portfolio manager whose job it is to move that NDA over to ORSP. They look at it, they move it through the system. Now, I know on an institutional level, they've tried to get master service agreements with the large companies so that they don't have to start wrangling over the little minor things. Like those are all set. So you're coming under a master services agreement, it'll be much faster. But there are actually websites, and perhaps that's a to-do maybe from this conference is, and I don't know if there is a particular go-to website where you can say, click here, I want to submit an NDA, or send an email, but ORSP is always happy to, they have an email address, you can send them an email and say, I don't know what to do, I have this thing, or the CTSU also has an email. FFMI has an email, and you can literally send an email and say, I've received this NDA, I don't know what to do next. And they send it through the system. The pace at which it goes through the system may be, if it's a brand new company, they've never talked to Michigan before, they threw in all their language that Michigan won't accept. It might take a little bit longer because they're negotiating back and forth. If it's a big company, there's a master service agreement, it may just speed quite through. And the NDAs usually go through pretty quickly. It's the clinical trial agreements that become, quite, or if it's an actual agreement, statement of work and things like that, those are much slower because there are a lot more details. But what you shouldn't do is sign the NDA as an individual, because you do not represent the University of Michigan. So I've seen faculty tell me, oh yeah, I already signed the NDA for that clinical trial. I'm like, oh, you can't do that. Now, if it's an NDA for a consulting agreement, like they want to ask me about their clinical trial, or they want me as an individual, I can sign an NDA as an individual followed by my consulting agreement, or an NDA sometimes without a consulting agreement. Because the other mistake I see more junior faculty do is, let's say it's the first time a company reached out to you and then you're like, oh no, you need to pay me for this 1 hour conversation, that's a huge turnoff. Because they don't know you, they don't know what you don't know what they know, and you started out on that foot. Usually you sign the NDA, you have conversations, you build a relationship, then in the future they may say, hey, we want to pay you for that advice you're giving us because now we know each other. So that you can sign, but like, I want to do a clinical trial, I want to do this work with U of M, and Dr. Lugogo signed the NDA, it's not allowed.
Want regents of the university to sign off on that.
Yeah.
The system, I mean, we can talk more in detail. Each project is potentially different, as Najira had mentioned, right? If it's a clinical trial, there's a certain stepwise approach. If it's just a discussion to start with, right, exploratory, let's say, each department has their own approach and investigators. Part of this is just education, as Najira said. This is actually housed within the Office of Research and Sponsored Programs, which is part of UMOR or SP. There's a system electronically that you would fill out and send that in. For clinical trials, it's sped up through an intake process that somebody else fills out. Otherwise, at the local level, and it's not a trial, a lot of times it's either a research administrator, study staff of some kind, or the PI. But I'm happy to meet with you afterwards too, and just kind of give you custom discussions around what it would be in your local area.
Yeah.
The speed at which we get non-disclosures through, right? I like to describe it as it's like knocking on the door, okay? And then, you've got to ask mom to open the door first. You don't get to open the door. That's the way I kind of like to describe it. If you're on behalf of the University of Michigan, it ain't your house. It's mom's house. She opens the door.
Oh, one other last comment is if you are getting your very first consulting agreement and you're looking at it, they're asking you to do something you're not sure you can do. Of course, you can go to the website and read the rules, but as many of you know, there are always the gray areas. You're reading the rules and you're like, I don't know, am I allowed to do this? Just send the compliance office an email. They respond pretty quickly. They'll even hop on a call and then they'll tell you you can do these or you can't do this. They sometimes will even look at the consulting agreement for you to let you know if you want to do it or not. And the consulting agreements can be twofold. One can be with University of Michigan. You do the work, they get the funding, and then you use the funding for, effort, university related work, or you can have a consulting agreement as an individual. So there are many people out there to guide you. And I find it's better to ask for permission than for forgiveness on the back end, even though that might not be a good philosophy, maybe in life, perhaps, I don't know. But at least in this regard, asking for clarification is much better.
Mike, you said that far and away when dealing with industry, your biggest book of business is clinical trials. I wanted to ask a little bit about the possibility of industry sponsorship for preclinical or bench science. I don't know if Najira or Thomas have experience in that or not, but just a few comments about what does it take to attract industry to support my bench science? Do I have to have a really unique model or a really unique assay, or how can I get your attention in that area?
The experience I have was we had a clinical trial we were doing that was mechanistic, and it was a biologic treatment for asthma. And we have a faculty member in our division that studies the lung microbiome, and we were quite interested in whether differential response is related to different microbial composition in the lung. So that had nothing to do per se with the study, but it was a mechanistic clinical research study with bronchoscopy and samples. So our approach to them was, hey, you're already doing this. We can enhance what you learn from your samples. If you give us this X amount of dollars and some samples, we can, help you to expand. They want to be cool. They want to be in the know. So, if you find something that's somewhat connected that can help them understand mechanism or understand differential response, or you might have an answer for some kind of basic science piece that fits into their portfolio, you can make a pitch to them about it for sure. I don't, and so the things I've seen have always been in proximity to some asset that they are developing, and you're like, hey, I can show you a preclinical piece that might enhance response, pick out responders, explain why this is happening identify people who might have a unique side effect because, in my research, if you intervene here, you could cause this rare thing I've seen in mice. Are you looking for that in your patients? And so those kinds of sales pitches, in my opinion, work the best. So
They knew your expertise, they knew what you could do.
you can do it de novo, like if let's say you go to a conference and they're presenting something on, hey, we are targeting this pathway. And you're like, oh my gosh, in my mouse model, when we targeted that pathway, there was this unintended consequence. Or if you target this, maybe it increases this. They don't know that. I would go up afterwards and say, hey, can we have a conversation, set up a Zoom? Because I do work in your area and I'm going to tell you a little secret. If you do this, this might be something you didn't think about in a positive or negative way. So you can introduce yourself to these people at congresses, at meetings, and you can schedule meetings later on and show them your work. This is what I'm doing. This is why I think we might have a reason to collaborate. And they're often quite open to it. And actually they are quite generous when they choose to invest some, it's not $10,000 often they're giving you. They have sometimes more resources to really give you more funding, and then they'll connect you to the preclinical team, because I work mostly with the phase 1 going forward, but all the people working in the preclinical space, they'll hook you to the scientists who are doing bench work. And then lo and behold, they may say, oh, we already know that. Or they may say, oh my gosh, what unique technical thing are you doing? And they may decide to fund your unique technical work because they're not doing it. I think a lot of listening for those tips and aha moments, and then going up afterwards and introducing yourself is the best way to start.
Yeah,
Yes.
under NDA is what I would jump into. You're on a
Yes,
roll,
yes.
so I stopped for a second,
Yes,
but yeah,
yes, yes.
don't give the secret sauce away on the first conversation.
Yeah.
But yes.
I think those, well spoken. I will flip that question around a little bit. Many times the pharmaceutical industry knows a little bit about what they don't know.
Yeah.
Okay. And sometimes they say, hey, we need to find XYZ expertise, or sometimes they'll come to even me or the medical science liaisons that work with me and say, there's this researcher at University of Michigan that really has the skills and expertise that we need. And I have no idea who they are and how to get to them. I call Mike. I go, I'm going to give you a name. I'm going to give you the reason why I'm going to give you this name.
Yeah.
And you can either confirm or deny, but can you somehow help us? Right?
Yeah.
So it does work the other way around as well. Okay. So.
Which adds to my quick point of, that's why we do a lot of the internal due diligence to be found. We can do publication checks and everything, but when we reach out, that's part of our goal, is to understand where you're at in your research. We'll ask those questions. The people that I talked about, they're out and about all the time, talking and interviewing and understanding what it is that you're doing.
Yeah.
That interface is the most important piece for us to be able to facilitate, because we really do sit in both worlds. So
Yeah.
Yep.
So our next online question submitted asks, are individual PIs responsible for covering the cost of expenses if they exceed revenue from the sponsor for a clinical trial? And how does that affect getting faculty interested in working with industry?
The short answer is yes.
Yeah.
It's the short answer. It's the sad answer. So I would say that I'm a businesswoman. That's what I run, a business within the University of Michigan. Ultimately, if I overspend my clinical trial, I have to be ready to pay it off. And, if I have little coifers or startups, so I would say if you delve into clinical trials, you need to understand the business side. The clinical side is a little easier because you're a clinician. If they tell you assess adverse events, look at labs, figure out if anyone is having a safety issue, easy. Understanding how much my coordinator costs, how much is their fringe benefits, how much do I have to pay for this, how many trials do I need in order to break even, how many patients do I think I can bring in. Now, certainly the clinical trial support unit has people that can help you, but probably you need to talk to seasoned people like me and other faculty who do this and have done it for years, because it is the scary part. You know, it's not like an NIH grant where if you get funding, you know, each year if I submit my progress report, I'm going to get X dollars. You can plan it better. You literally earn each dollar as you go. And there are a lot of unpredictable things, like maybe you thought you'd get 20 patients and you got 2. Now what do you do? You know, the clinical trial support unit has a coordinator pool. So maybe you're able to buy a little piece of a coordinator. It's hard to start up if you don't have a coordinator. So in my experience here at U of M over 8 years, I've supported multiple young investigators where I said, you know, we'll take on that trial. You're the PI, I'll mentor you. And I took on the financial risk because I had the buffer to take on the financial risk. So you may have to have investments from your division if you're the first person ever to do clinical trials, or you pair up with somebody who gives you a little piece of a coordinator. It's not easy to break in, but it's very, very rewarding long term. So if there's a person thinking about it, I think the university wants to grow more and more clinical trialists. And we are, I think you can, you know, partner with Mike and they can introduce you to more seasoned people we can help. And it's like mentorship in the hospital. You know, the first day I went to walk on the floor, I didn't go alone. I had a resident, an attending, a fellow, and I could turn to them and say, I don't know what to do here. Can you help me? That's exactly what it's like in clinical trials. When you first start out, you need people who know what they're doing to teach you how to run the business of clinical research.
Yeah, I'll jump in. I mean, it's not just clinical trials, industry-sponsored activities, right? It's a contract, as I described in my talk. In some ways, don't call it a grant. It's a contract.
Mm-hmm.
They want something out of this, and
Mhm.
we set up those milestones and those budgets.
Mm-hmm.
That's the most important part. When you're working with a team member like myself or Amelia who's here, one of the questions we're going to ask you is, can you do it within the budget?
Right.
No is a perfectly good answer.
Yeah.
All because they want you to do it and they're going to pay you to do it doesn't mean that they can afford you to do it.
Yeah.
So that's where this extra due diligence comes in. We can do
Yeah.
a whole probably workshop on that activity.
Yeah.
The risks are there potentially, but it's just a different type of activity. Is it truly more risky than, say, some other type of activity? I don't know. You can budget overrun all the time, I suppose.
Yeah.
That's the fiscal management and
Yeah.
the idea of performance tied to payments, which is exactly what this type of activity is. So it's just a different way of doing things. Is it more risky? Not at all, especially if you plan appropriately. And like I said, part of the mindset being not every deal should get done, guys. Absolutely shouldn't be. And in fact, part of your justification when you're talking to a company is to say, if you're asking me to get 20 patients in, it's going to take me 10 extra months to do it.
Mm-hmm.
You can't afford it.
Mm-hmm.
I can't do this because you're not paying me the resources required to get the work done. That's
Yeah.
that's the relationship we're talking about here.
Yeah.
And we're talking about fiscal responsibility. Okay, sorry. That's a great question.
Yeah.
So this next one has to deal with strategies and technology used to enroll patients in clinical trials. And it says, how is the health system leveraging technology to identify patients in our practices who may be eligible for common disease clinical trials? For instance, in ophthalmology, private practices do the majority of common disease clinical trials, and academics lag far behind. One difference is that private practices are using AI to identify clinical trial candidates, but academics identify patients manually.
This is a red hot space. I'm going to say, I have to say, like, I'm not kidding. I heard a company pitch the other day around clinical trial matching. Thomas, Carl,
Yeah.
Shannon,
Yeah.
we had a meeting earlier. Clinical trial matching was discussed.
Yeah.
Quickly, is there a solution in place at the University of Michigan? Not that I'm aware of. Not at this point in time. There is an ocean of opportunities here, of course. It's holding a lot of promise. Different companies with different solutions at this time, but none that I'm aware of. Najir, are you at all? And are
No,
you using any
I
AI?
mean, I'm not, we're not using AI. We are using things like Slicer, Dicer, Searching Epic, UMHR, advertising, but it's kind of fairly rudimentary. I will say as a researcher, two comments. One is every time a company has brought me people who are going to find me people, they never find me anybody, but they get a lot of money out of it. So I've twisted the conversation back to the company and said, well, instead of paying peoplefinder.com, whatever company you found this time, why don't you give me the money? Because I can have a marketing person help me. I can deploy AI. I can find people to help me locally to succeed at this site. And in fact, Mike helped us to successfully negotiate a fairly substantial amount of money with the company to build a screening process to bring people in. And I think so far it's been one of the more successful ways of recruiting. So you can kind of turn that around. The second comment is for common diseases, it's very hard for us to compete with outside, ophthalmology practice X. I mean, if you have asthma that's not too bad and you're in a practice with 7 pulmonologists and you're each seeing clinic 4 sessions a week times 7, I mean, that's a huge volume of people coming in and out of that clinic with a common illness. And guess who's coming to see me? The most refractory person. So you have to be a bit cognizant of the fact that, I don't take trials that are like inhaler X for the most mild asthma patient. I might not have that population. So you have to know your population. Are there other hurdles? Certainly. Some people are like, I don't want to go all the way to U of M, and I'll go to the practice around the corner, which has a smaller catchment area. So there are definitely some of those things that private practices have that make it easier. But you have to be a little bit aware of the population that might be coming to you versus that's out there and going to like a private practice setting. But one last comment, the companies still want us because we are the key opinion leaders, we are the experts, we are the people who give that study street cred, and we are able to really speak to the science, and we help, we are on the papers, we legitimize the science. So they might have 20 other sites that are mom and pop shops all over the place, and those people are going to bring in the majority of the patients. I'm going to have very few patients, but they still want me to be involved even with my 2 or 3 because we are the experts. So you shouldn't not get in because you might have a fraction of the others, but I'll let you comment on whether we are worth it. I think the KOLs are worth it, but I'll let you comment on that.
It is absolutely correct. It is worth it. It is worth it. I can't comment on the question of AI at University of Michigan, but what I can say is in general, this industry is more of the AI looking at academic medical centers and research institutes. They're in their infancy stages of trying to figure out how to use AI. Okay. So just because you don't have it today doesn't mean you're not going to have it tomorrow. And the ones that already have it today, it's probably not doing more than search and find and create a list, right? It's not necessarily, it's an overlay over their EMRs, okay? And yes, there are probably some institutions are experimenting, doing some more unique things, but as soon as you get the AI involved in overlays of your EMR, then I now think you're in the process of doing some unique things to help identify patients.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right, so we're right up against time, so I'm going to ask for final remarks. Would
Yeah.
you give one piece of advice to our researchers about working with industry? What would that be?
I would say it's been very rewarding, and you can make a career out of it. I have never had my own NIH grant, and I got promoted to professor, and I've published very many articles, and so it is a bona fide path, and it's very rewarding, and I've used many drugs before they ever came to market, and I can look at my patient, and I did it partly because I don't like to be helpless, and I can tell my patient I might not have a solution today, but there is one in the pipeline because there's this drug and this molecule and this target. So I would summarize it as very rewarding and worth pursuing. And I would speak for myself to say I'm happy to mentor anybody that's interested in this kind of a career path. It's not being pursued by many. So it's also kind of a wide open, nice area to grow into.
Thomas?
So I think about this question and I'll take a little bit of a different approach. Very well spoken and Comments are well taken. I would think about it from the perspective of the same advice I would give someone who's actually trying to expand their career and move up the corporate or company ladder, right? And it's your circle of friends, okay? So think about who you know. Think about developing those industry relations sooner before you need them so that you can actually continue to grow, okay? You'll learn, we will learn, and the day will come where your circle of friends and network is really all that you need. And you'll look up one day and go, wow, I have all these connections. I know where to go. I have the right people at various pharmaceutical companies. So my advice is to think about your research and where you're going and where you want to be and who you want to be as a professional. And then I would say, once you have your network in place, I would say, think about what the pharmaceutical industry is trying to solve for, okay? If you're thinking about it holistically, you're trying to think about an unmet medical need.
Yeah.
Right? So does your research, does your work, does it relate to a discovery that could potentially help alleviate that pain and suffering for patients? Okay? Because the pharmaceutical industry will look for unmet need and how to address it. The other thing that I would say too is in your research and the things that you're doing, think about risk, right? And in the pharmaceutical industry, we talk about de-risking opportunities. We talk about de-risking clinical trials. We talk about de-risking processes so that we can think about where to spend resources, all right? And we can talk about the risks that are associated, but think about the work that you're doing, where it's at, right? Is it really new and cutting edge? And it's just the first 1 or 2 studies? That's a lot of risk, right? How would you think about doing the next phase of your research in a way in which it alleviates a little bit of that risk, okay? So unmet need, so a circle of friends, unmet need, and then think about risk.
Fantastic. Najira, Thomas, thank you so much for your
Thank you.
expert advice.
Thank you for having me.
so much.
Pleasure to be here.
All right. Again, a huge thanks to Mike and Jerry and Thomas for a very lively discussion. I think it was industry sponsorship is an area that I think more and more people can be utilizing. So we're going to take a quick bio break here for a moment. There are some light refreshments out in the hallway here. We will reconvene at precisely 4 o'clock. Out of respect for those that are online, we'll keep the Zoom open and we'll just reconvene at 4 o'clock, okay? Thank you so much.
You want to keep it
Yes, you were huge. I am Rich Vogel. Okay, let's start taking our seats here and get started again. By 1 point. Yeah, I hate to interrupt the very valuable networking that's going on, but we do need to move on our agenda. Again, there's 140 some people online that we need to consider. And so for our final panel discussion, we're going to be talking about philanthropy and engagement with donors. And so to broach this subject for us is Chris Shoemaker, who is the Managing Director for Development at Michigan Medicine, collaborator of Fast Forwards for quite a number of years, and we're happy to have him here. So I think he has a panel as well. So we'll hear all about what does it take to engage with a philanthropic donor. Chris? Your slides.
Okay. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Yeah, I do need to start by thanking my Fast Forward colleagues, great colleagues, almost 8 years have been working with FFMI. And I wear a few hats at Michigan Medicine in some ways, but I'm going to talk a lot today about grateful patient fundraising or how we fundraise with our patients at Michigan Medicine. We're coming off a historic year of fundraising for Michigan Medicine. We raised $380 million in FY25. That is a record for us. So we're really proud of that. Roughly 200 million of that 380 came from patients, and most of that went to research. So I want you to get a sense of the opportunity of partnering with development and partnering with our patients. You'll hear the word partner a lot, but one thing I want you to walk away with is our patients want to invest in your research. They do. They don't know what's possible. They don't know what work you're doing. And it's our job to develop meaningful relationships with the right partners, and tell them about your work. So some of today is encouraging you to partner with development, the development partner that might be in your department or working with your department. And then also opening your minds a little bit to how it might be to work with potential donor. Okay. Let's see. Got it. Okay, so my presentation, from grateful hearts to groundbreaking research, how patients become partners in discovery.
Share your screen real quick.
Yeah, sorry.
No, it's. One second, just a short technical delay.
I know I broke it. Well, I could tell you a little bit about development, our development office. In our last campaign at Michigan Medicine, we raised almost 1.5 billion. That campaign ended in 2018. And I had just come from Illinois that year. Thank you. Here's a quick agenda. Illinois, the entire University of Illinois system, also a 3-campus system, was raising 2 billion. So just in Michigan Medicine, we are a powerhouse to some degree. I don't want to oversell our work, but quite successful in fundraising. We have a big team of 150 people. Eric Barrett leads our office, and he's been around for a decade. So Eric is one of the most accomplished fundraisers in the state of Michigan, frankly. And we have a team of other managing directors that oversee various areas of the health system. I'm not going to go into great detail here. I just wanted you to know the scope of the team. You heard from Colleen, who leads our corporate and foundation relations team. We have 50 major gift fundraisers who are working with patients and donors in all different areas of Michigan Medicine, along with many other teams that support different functions that lead to those large numbers I referenced earlier. We are in a campaign. The university is in a $7 billion campaign, which is among the largest. I think it's the largest for a state university, but among the largest in the country. Michigan Medicine's goal is 2.3 billion, with 4 years remaining, 60% towards that goal. And our key priorities are areas I think you would guess: patient care, research, education. We're growing as a health system, so fundraising for facilities is a major goal, and then health quality and engaging our community is another key part of our campaign. Main thing I want you to take away from this slide is our work, that yellow box to the left. So we've got 50 fundraisers I mentioned whose true goal is to foster meaningful relationships. So we are looking for the right partners, the right donors that want to work with us for the right reasons. And we truly want to develop genuine, authentic relationships with our top potential partners. All right, as I mentioned, we are roughly, we're closer to 1.5 billion actually. So after the end of FY25, 63-ish% to goal. So we continue to get closer to our $2.3 million goal. A little bit about Grateful Patient fundraising. As I mentioned in FY25, roughly 200 million of our 380 raised came from patients. And a lot of that 200 million, I don't have the number off the top of my head, but a good majority of that 200 million went to research. There was a great study in Nature last year in 2024 that shared some great data about philanthropy and comparing it to federal support. So federal support has not kept pace with research across the country. And now philanthropy provides a comparable amount of funding across the country as compared to federal agencies. At US universities alone, private donors contributed 44% of all basic research funding. And that continues to go up. So I realize these numbers are a little bit dated. This is what was in the Nature article that I could send around following. They were looking retrospectively, obviously, but philanthropy, private grants has now exceeded NIH grants. And I think it's fair to say it's likely that that's going to continue to exceed, especially given the current landscape. I think there's a little bit of concern, like the federal dollars, obviously, if you get a grant, you're sort of guaranteed funding for a certain period of time, 3 to 5 years. There's a lot of data now to support how persistent our donors are in supporting your research. So if the donor contributes in consecutive years, so 2 years in a row, they're 80%, there's an 80% likelihood they'll give in year 3. After 7 years, they're going to give it, there's a 90% chance that they're going to continue to give. So sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes private support can be even more dependable. Hold on, I have one more key stat I wanted to share on that. No, I guess that's it. And we're going to touch on this a little bit with our panel here in a couple minutes. We've got a lot of PhDs in the room. We do have some physician scientists, so I'm sort of speaking to you too in this slide. But I sort of co-lead Grateful Patient fundraising. So we are routinely, every day, we're working with clinicians and their patients for how they might want to support the work of a physician scientist or the work of the department if the physician isn't doing science. And what we're seeing more and more across the departments at Michigan Medicine is PhD scientists partnering with clinicians who are not as engaged in research. So, and some of our top clinical partners see phenomenal donors across the university and across the state. So, one of the things we talk about is those that have significant wealth, they're incentivized, at least from a tax perspective, to give. And we sort of say, why not give to us? Let's make an argument that they give to support the work that's happening at Michigan Medicine. So I'm encouraging the PhDs in the room to find a clinical partner if it makes sense. If you already have a clinical partner, let's talk. A big part about engaging patients and families in your work is being able to share a story. I think that came up with Mike's group earlier. So we want to work with you to share the most effective story about your work. Our donors want to be inspired. They're giving because they believe you're going to accomplish something visionary or great. And that combination between a clinician and a PhD is so powerful. So that's one key takeaway. Working with your development staff, so getting to know, we need to build trust with you as well. And we're out meeting with people. We need to be able to share your story effectively. So building an internal relationship with your development staff. And then this does tend to be a long-term game. We're going to talk about that with the panel here as well. So sticking with it, it's not something that's going to happen overnight. Typically, it's a long-term, again, genuine, authentic relationships with key people. And then the last thing I would encourage you is, as scientists, you have a circle of influence. I know this sort of goes without saying, but being a little bit more bold to engage your circle of influence and share your story, be visionary, and ask people, invite people to participate. One of the roles that we talk about a lot in development is we want to allow you to sort of maintain the sanctity of your relationships. So if in the case of a physician, we want that physician-patient relationship to be maintained. We don't want them really talking about philanthropy. That's our job. Let us take that forward for you and represent you in that way. We do the same work with PhDs. It's just a little bit different because you may not be treating the potential donor. Okay. All right, let's move on to our panel. And I wanna introduce Rich Rogel, who we will bring up. Rich, I think you're gonna be a giant head on the screen. It's gonna be really great to see your face here in a second. Let me share a little bit more about Rich. If you have happened to walk by the Rogel Cancer Center, that is the Rich Rogel that I'm referencing. He's one of the top donors across the university and truly just an incredible partner. So I've used that word a number of times. We truly partner with Rich. You know, it's kind of funny. I sort of think like Rich is, it's almost like I work with Rich. If you go on a trip with Rich, he knows so many things about the university. He's one of the greatest development people himself because of the way he talks about the university he loves. And Rich has been a donor and a partner for decades with us. So again, that comes over time, and he truly invests in this university. So he knows an enormous amount on his own. And then the other person, in just one second, Rich will bring you up. I want to invite Edie Briskin to come up. Through the work of Shirley Schlafer Foundation, as well as her own support, her own personal support. She's anywhere you like. She is a key supporter of the Taubman Institute Emerging Scholars Program. We'll talk about that. She's funded multiple professorships and invests in early career scientists as well as women. And I'm excited to ask her and Rich some questions about this as we face some challenges in funding women's research at the moment. Okay, can we bring up Rich here in just a sec?
For everybody.
Oh, great. Yep.
All
All right, I'm going to start with some questions for Rich. Rich, are you there?
I'm right here.
Excellent. Okay.
Well,
Yes, great. Okay, so Rich, you've spoken movingly over the years about the personal losses that motivated your giving from your daughter and your father's deaths. How did those experiences shape your decision to support cancer research?
Actually, it started before that. I was the chairman of the Michigan Difference campaign. And what I tried to do was find out about all the different aspects of the university. And I went and visited Michigan Medicine, LSNA, all of that. And one of the most important meetings I had was with Max Wisha. And we spent about 3 hours, and they had just discovered the cancer stem cell. And he showed me through the facilities, showed me the cancer stem cell in the electron microscope. And when we got back to his office, he said to me, he said, you know, you'll never understand breast cancer until you do rounds with me. And that was, to me, a very incredible statement, because it showed that the physician scientists really cared about the patients. And then in the next campaign, I was co-chair, and I chaired the Michigan Medicine portion. And we were having seminars at my house in Colorado And a lot of times they focused on cancer. And I was already thinking very seriously about possibility of naming the cancer center. And my wife came back from lunch and she goes to me and says, you know, one of my friends asked me what was the name of the cancer center in Michigan. And I thought that would be a great idea if it was a Roble Cancer Center. I think I started crying at that point in time. It was such a moving experience. So we met with Michigan, and I wanted this to be extremely significant because it was going to be for more than research. It was for scholarships, fellowships, etc. And Michigan asked for $120 million. And I said, no. Let's do it $150 million so we can make a total statement because we want to continue our support for scholarships, etc. And that's why in 2018, we named the Cancer Center.
Amazing story, Rich. But what I took from some of that is how involved the faculty were with you, you know, letting you experience certain things and how moving that would be. I share some of that, you know, as we experience things on the development side with our faculty, you can't help but be moved and inspired by the work. We experience this through our donors as well. So amazing, Rich. So, okay, well, let's go to the next amazing thing that you recently made a $50 million gift that enabled research structure focused on high-risk, high-impact pancreatic cancer research. And you really allow the scientists to think A to Z instead of incrementally. And I guess I want to ask you, like, how did the 50 million come about following that your other enormous gift? And how did you envision this transforming research?
Okay, this is a little bit of a longer story, but I think it's important, especially with all the scientists in the audience. In 20, development came to me and we were talking about COVID. And we had two scientists, Arul Chennaiyan and Johnny Sexton, who wanted to kill COVID. And our caseload in Michigan was starting to drop. And they knew that I had some very significant contacts in Asia. So they said, is there any way we could do the trials in Asia? And so I met with them quite a few times through Zoom, et cetera. And I asked them, well, I'll come back to what I asked them. By the way, the trials were very successful. Johnny's he had 13 drugs that in the test tube killed COVID. The best one was lactoferrin, which we can buy from Amazon right now from about 50 different manufacturers. And Arul had found that when they got the COVID virus, he found that COVID used the same two receptors in cells that prostate cancer used to metastasize. And he had a drug licensed to a Chinese company that would stop that. So we did I was able to set up clinical trials in Indonesia, and the results were spectacular. If you remember, the monoclonal antibody lowered the death toll from 35 to 31% in the ICU. The combination of these two drugs lowered it from 35% to 4%. Unfortunately, the Johnny's drug, when he went to the FDA to see whether he can go right to phase 2, and they said, no, this drug has never been tested. It's a supplement, and it'll have to go through phase 1. Well, there's not a company in the world that's going to pay for going through phase 1 when there are already about 50 different manufacturers. And the FDA slow-walked Arul's drug through. And then with what's going on in China, the funds aren't there to run it through phase 2 trials. But I asked them, I said to them, how much I asked this as a business person, how much will this cost to get from where you're at now into production? And they looked at me like I had lost my mind or I was from outer space. They'd never been asked a question like that. And I just kept that in the back of my mind. And then when this was all over, I went to Eric Fearon. I said, Eric, what happens if we put a team together and took a disease state and said, we want to get from the start of the disease state to a specific end? And we had a captain of the team, and they put their own team members together, and they told us what they needed, not what we wanted them to need. And it wasn't grant to grant. It was from a starting point to an end point. He loved the idea. And we went to Marshall, and Marshall loved the idea and said, let's try it with one disease. Eric picked pancreatic cancer. And I thought this was going to be a tremendous fundraising tool. I had no idea, no intention whatsoever of funding this. And then the summer before last, the Cancer Center magazine came out with an article that there were already 60 people in this team. And I said to Susan, we have to fund this. And we did. And now, by the way, there are over 100 people in this team. And I think they're making some very significant progress.
Boy, I'm eating this up, Rich, as a fundraiser. So I absolutely love it. Thank you I do agree. I think sharing how involved you are and how one thing leads to another, it's so important over time. All right, a couple more quick questions here. I love the way you talk about Michigan being collaboration U, the cross-departmental brain power that Michigan can bring. How do you see philanthropy, or how have you experienced philanthropy accelerating that spirit of collaboration?
I've seen it, actually, Chris, I see it in several ways. One is how we've put together the Rolla Blondie Pancreatic Center. I'm getting emails. First of all, I've got emails from some our scientists who want to join the group. But even more importantly, I've talked to other scientists who say, maybe we should do it for XYZ disease. And in order to do that, you can't just have Michigan medicine. You got to have the basic sciences, you have to have pharmacy, you have to have engineering, sometimes LSA, et cetera. And one of the things that the philanthropy can do is get rid of the serendipity of what can happen at the university. We built the basic science and research building to put scientists together so they can talk and find out, what the physicist thinks about the chemist, et cetera. And in all my years of working with Michigan, if you call it work, I call it fun. I've seen some tremendous examples where a person in one department talks to a person in a different school and says, I have this problem. That person says, that's easy, I can solve it overnight. And they do. And work and research can continue from doing that.
You've co-chaired multiple campaigns now. How many, actually?
This is my third one.
Campaigns typically last 7 to 9 years.
6 years old.
Yeah. So you are a leader through your volunteerism, you're a leader through your philanthropy. How have you seen your involvement influence the culture at Michigan, or the vision or direction? I mean, how do you, that's kind of a tough question, but do you think you've had an effect on culture?
Absolutely. It's scientists are scientists and businessmen are businessmen, and a lot of times the twain doesn't meet. And so I've been involved with the start of 3 advisory boards, one for the Cancer Center, and 2 for our China joint institutes. And I've been involved with Michigan Medicine's advisory board. And I think that when you can bring ideas from the outside and look at things from a different perspective, it can really help. And again, it's just a combination of the cultures getting together. Chris, I get calls all the time from some of our docs and scientists and stuff. How can we do this? And when they think they've run into a roadblock, they contact me. Where can we go from here, and how can we get this done? It's a complex world, but it's been made much more complex this year with what's gone on with NIH. And when I talk to our researchers and our deans and stuff, I'm absolutely terrified. And one of the things we've done is we have changed how our gift is being used, and basically we've built a contingency fund to help the scientists and researchers who have been affected by the cuts in NIH and the inability to hire PhD students to continue their research, et cetera. Our people really care. Yes, things need to be changed with NIH, and that's one of the reasons I put together or have been promoting this disease-specific type of research where you get all these partners together. And I think it's been very successful.
Well, last question, how do you balance sort of the need for immediate innovation or an immediate impact with a long-term institutional investment? I mean, how do you think about that now?
So that's a really interesting question, and I have to look at that in two ways. As a fundraiser for the University of Michigan, and I've been such since 1987. One of the things that I've always done when I'm working with donors is say, look, why don't you try a scholarship? Put a scholarship for 4 years, and then maybe you'll continue it, or maybe you'll endow it. And that's been a very, very successful tactic. So when we set up the naming of the Rogel Cancer Center, we set up a minimum amount of $1.5 million a year for current research and other pillars that Eric set up, and the rest would go into the endowment of our gifts each year. We changed that this year because of what NIH has done. That's why we set up the contingency fund. I want our young people to stay in science. I want our research to continue. I want the benefits that we do for the rest of the world, and I get to see those all the time. I want those to continue. I cannot tell you how happy I am every day when I read the press releases that come out of the University of Michigan, and I see Rogel Cancer Center, and I see Rogel Cancer Center, or the Rogel Blondie Fund, because I know that we have helped do this, and we've helped humanity.
Fantastic. Thank you for those comments, Rich. There's one Rich Rogel. There's only one that exists. So I wanted to balance a little bit of Rich Rogel, who's named a cancer center, and other things here with Edie's perspective. And so I'm going to transition, and then we're going to bring you both together to answer a couple questions. So let's transition to Edie Briskin. Welcome. Thank you for joining in person as well. Okay, so you have funded multiple emerging scholars within the Taubman Institute. Dr. Erica Newman described being named the Edith Briskin Emerging Scholar and she remarked, it's humbling yet inspiring, how inspiring it is to know that Edie is donating. This recognition resonated deeply with her and others. Her words reflect the emotional weight your support carries. What What does it mean to you when researchers express that kind of inspiration?
I think that they are, you know, they're happy that that I have or anybody has funded their research. And the fact that my emerging scholars, the emerging scholars kind of happened through the Taubman Institute, but it actually happened before that. Originally, I had, when I was married, we had given a pledge to the Cancer Center, to the Fund for Discovery. And after about 5 or 6 years, I was not really thrilled. I was glad that we had done that, but then it became, then after my mother had passed away, I became the person in the family who runs the family foundation. And I wanted a more personal approach to giving. I wanted to know who was getting the money, what they were doing, how they were doing it. It was all for early stage clinical researchers. And it was all suggested to me by Val Castle, who I was working with at the time. She was not yet head of MOD at the time. And she said, if you really want to have a more personal way of giving and to know the person, she said, and to make a difference for, it's more important to make a difference for someone who's younger, who doesn't have the ability and the lab and all the equipment and all the funding to, and all the work that goes behind getting to the point where you can apply to the NIH. And she said, and this would, if you gave a 3-year commitment, and after 3 years, she said, if that person, that doctor, doesn't have all the information she needs, because I really have done it for women, she said, then that probably isn't going to fly in the end. She said, but if after those 3 years, there should be enough information in their research to apply to the NIH for grants, which has happened many times. And so when I was asked to be on the advisory board of the Taubman Institute, I told them what I was doing with that. And then they named that the Emerging Scholars Program. And I had already done about 2 of them with Val besides that. And since the advisory board is no longer a part of that institute, I've continued doing it. And actually what's happened is it's spread throughout many divisions of medicine. And they, so neurology or dermatology or whatever it might be, have their own emerging scholar things.
So you deserve
there.
credit for starting emerging scholars to some degree.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's really fulfilling to know that I have helped young people on their path to their clinical research, and to hear their stories. And we get together actually as a group around once or twice a year sometimes, and have a dinner and talk about what they're doing and the research that they're doing and how their careers are going and their families and the whole thing. So it's really pretty wonderful.
Well, that's amazing. And you're illustrating exactly what I'm trying to get across to the audience. If you're a scientist or clinician scientist, that, again, you find the right partner who's really going to invest in you and invest in your research, and it can grow into something really beautiful over time for each, each side, for each person. You've invested wonderfully in women's research, and we're in a little bit of a crisis perhaps in funding women's research. I was working on a proposal recently in coronary artery disease where across the country there's $4 per man, and only 17 cents in funding to study women in coronary artery disease. As an example, that's sort of an extreme separation there. And you've proven over time investing in women's research, women scientists also in women's research. Could you talk about that? What led to that? Obviously, through various experiences, but
Women in the past and still do not have the same advancement opportunities as men have for decades and centuries. And I think it's important that they do. One of the reasons is because of the research that you just talked about. And it's not fair that they don't have an equal chance. I guess my giving has turned into more of a diversity, equity, inclusion kind of giving, which didn't start out to be that way, but has. And in this environment, it kind of is not looked upon by the powers that be as to be of interest at all. In fact, they don't like it. And to continue that, I am happy to continue doing what I do because it's really important. We have seen women now in more heads of departments. We have seen more getting research grants. And, and they have all, done this while raising families to boot.
Last question here, and we'll bring both you and Rich into a dialogue. So you have chosen to support high risk, unrestricted innovation in some ways. I guess what I'm trying to get at is looking back after what you've experienced with the scientists that you've worked with and what they've achieved. I mean, how would you reflect on the impact that you've had or the impact that they've had as scientists? Could you talk a little bit about that?
I think that it's an impact on their lives and their research and the whole community that they are serving. Without the funding, they may not have gotten the grants that they've gotten in the long run. And, it's kind of like getting a scholarship. You don't have to find the money yourself. It's given to you and you make the best of what you can do. I have gotten to pick the people that I want. I'm normally given, 2 or 3 people that may be of interest. And sometimes I want to meet all of them. Sometimes I immediately go for one. And I'll meet them and talk to them and, something clicks and it just kind of works. I think that women have as much of a chance at discovering things as men do. They practice medicine. There are about as many women practicing medicine and certainly going to medical school as men are. And to have the ability to earn the same amount of money, which they don't, and to get as many grants as men do, which they don't, I think is really important. And if you start at the base level of what they really need at the very beginning, it can give them a chance to grow and develop.
That's great. All right, we have time for maybe one more question between the two of them. If you could answer briefly. Okay. How do you balance your personal interests in what you want to support with the needs of the institution? How would you answer that? Why don't you go first, Edie?
I recently, the other night, was with Donna Martin, And I said to her, I'm looking for next year for a new emerging scholar. And find me somebody in PEDS who really has some interesting research they're doing, really needs the money for the research that they're doing, and who you think, really deserves, a leg up kind of thing. So that's basically how it's been the whole time I've been doing this, and it's been 25 years or more of doing it. So it's with that, and in neurology and in women's health too, it's been the same thing. Approaching the head of the department and saying, who needs seed funding to do this, and so far it's worked.
That's a great point. We talked about sharing your story, how effectively you can share your story, sharing it with your chair and making sure that it's a priority for your chair to fund your research or to help fund your research. And your development team will do basically what the chair asks us to do. So,
and the other thing is that the doctors who need the funding should just ask. I mean, you've got to ask somebody about, I need funding. Who can I ask to fund me? Tell the head of your department or whatever it might be.
yeah, great point. All right, Rich.
Yeah.
Okay, you remember the question, go. Yeah.
So I wish I had more money. It's the only way to put it, because there's so much more I want to do. But, the point that was just raised about ask when people need it. I was meeting with pulmonology, and the physician said to me, how do I go about this? And the fact was, she was, without knowing, she was talking to the right person, because we were able to do something in our daughter's name, set up fellowships, because she needed fellowships done. So, that is critically important to ask. Not that necessarily I can do it or that you can do it or anybody can, but we can, as we reach out during the campaign and as we talk to people, we can find people who are interested in funding these needs. There are a tremendous amount of needs. We need to know what they are.
Great points. Both of them, by the way, said they both wish they had more money to give. So let's record that. Is there any Q&A online that we should address?
We do have one. All right, there we go. Recently, the Phil Knight gift of $2 billion was predicated on establishing Knight Cancer Center as a separate 501c3 institution affiliated with OHSU, but with independent governance. How do donors like Mr. Rogel and Ms. Briskin think about this approach for future fundraising regarding large gifts?
Well, the background there is, I can see Edie shaking her head a little bit. So the background is that Phil Knight, founder of Nike, gave $2 billion to the Oregon health system to almost move their cancer center, I believe it was cancer center, under a different 501c3 and keep the cancer center director that Phil liked. So it was fairly controversial in our space. And yet a $2 billion gift to support cancer research. So the question had to do with how, I don't know, what do you think about that? We're not really for that, for the idea of spinning out different nonprofits from the organization. I'll give you my opinion on that. But anyway, what are your thoughts?
If you're asking me, I would be totally against it. I mean, if you need the tax write-offs, Michigan is a 501c3, and I don't think donors I don't think I have any right to say that a person should be hired or fired or kept on. I would be totally against that. I'm not a scientist. I'm not an administrator. I would have no idea how to get that to do that. I think that that's a terrible idea.
I totally agree. It's scary, is what it is.
Maybe just one quick question, just to be very, very clear. So when you have a list of 3 or 4 candidates every year, that list comes from who, a department chair
Yes,
or from, well,
no,
Yeah, the
department chair.
so I think the message for our audience is that if you have a need, talk to your department chair and be sure that you are on their list of people that are doing great science but need some help to move it forward.
Right.
Exactly. Okay. Hey, round of applause for Edie and Rich. Thank you for the time. All right, we have one more quick.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to Chris and Edie and Rich for your time, and to Edie and Rich in particular for your generous support over the years. So one more quick presentation here. Um, That'll be from, you just dragged it over. There we go. Our final presentation is very, very quickly will be from Gina Sofer from our grants office, who is going to do a couple things, talk to you about resources that are available to you to actually operationalize what we've talked about today. How do you actually do that application? How do you refine your pitch? How do you refine your proposal, a grant from a grantsmanship standpoint? I think also she has an event coming up here in a couple of weeks that she'll going to put a plug in for as well that will provide a little more information. So Gina, thank you so much.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you, Brad. Thank you so much, FFMI and Office of Research and Michigan Medicine partners for inviting me today. I'm going to talk about some faculty resources to support your research funding that we have here in the Medical School Office of Research and Beyond in campus. Several of them have been mentioned today. I'm going to touch on them and show you where to find them and how to use them. So hopefully that's useful. I am the Assistant Director of Research Development here in the Office of Research in the Medical School, sitting in the Grant Services and Analysis Office. And my job as a research development specialist largely is to help our faculty maintain and obtain research funding. So we do that in a variety of reasons, in a variety of ways, and I'm going to show you some resources today. So first, if you have not been to the Office of Research website, it is medresearch.umich.edu/office-research. That's a mouthful. And I wanted to point out that there is this handy dandy research project route map here. And at the very top, if you start at the top of the route map, it says, have you touched base or do you know your research administrator? So one of the things about finding funding opportunities or knowing what's available in your department or what other investigators have been funded through different opportunities, if they have industry funding, if they have foundation funding, is to start with your research administrator in their department. They're well aware of what is being submitted and the colleagues in your department and in your research area and who and what is funding their research. So I encourage you to check out the research project route map where it will guide you along all of these resources in the Office of Research and throughout campus, throughout the life cycle of your research. I did not know that Paul Barrow was going to be here from the library earlier today, but I do want to reiterate that The library is a great resource for helping you find funding. So Judy Smith was mentioned earlier. This is her here in the picture. I don't know, I've been here the whole time. I didn't hear Paul outright mention that in addition to the research funding and grants guide, where it's a one-stop shop for internal funding, external funding, sorry about that, internal funding, external funding, and foundation funding opportunities, and Pivot, the database. It's a one-stop shop where all of that is. And then they also offer one-on-one research consultations. So you can meet with a library, a U of M library grant specialist to talk about your research, and they will help you set up pivot notifications and help you navigate all of these different funding opportunities and databases. And they're very responsive and they're wonderful. So I really encourage you to reach out to them for a one-on-one consultation and check out their website, like Colleen said earlier. I also wanted to point out on competition space here for the Office of Research. I snapshotted this yesterday, and I just wanted to point out that there are, if you go to competition space and look, you'll find other opportunities here for internal funding as well. So MISHAR has a K-12, there are pilot grant opportunities, and then also external limited submissions. So that's a great place to look for internal funding opportunities as well, and pilot funding. So Michigan Experts, I wanted to talk about Michigan Experts a little bit. As you're trying to go after funding opportunities, it's important to make sure you have collaborators in place and be able to enhance your projects if needed for different funding opportunities. Michigan Experts is a great place to find collaborators and expertise across the University of Michigan, not just in the medical school, but in other schools. So research profiles for investigators include publications, area of expertise, and also their scholarly activities and collaboration networks. So I always use Steve Kunkel as my example on Michigan Experts, the Executive Vice Dean of Research. You can see here he has a very extensive collaboration network because he's been doing research a long time. But the example I like to use is if you find somebody who you're like, I would like to be Dr. Kunkel someday. You can go under his scholarly activities and see which journals he publishes in. You can go under grants and you can see who funds his research. So it's not just NIH, but any foundations who fund his research, if he has any industry funding. So you can look at other researchers in your department or who you know have had successful funding paths and look and see who has funded their research. Some proposal development resources I wanted to point out that are available to medical school faculty. We have a grant proposal sampler, which is a repository of successfully funded proposals provided by faculty members to serve as an example. And we do have foundation awards in our proposal sampler, including American Cancer, American Diabetes, American Heart. And we are expanding and adding proposals to this all of the time. We also take donations of successfully funded proposals, so please reach out if you would like to contribute your proposal or funded award to this repository. We just recently put a PCORI grant in here. We're fortunate to get that from a faculty member, so check that out. You need a level 2 password to have access. Other things that we have that will make your life easier putting together proposals is boilerplate descriptions on our website that can be adapted to proposals, marketing, that has background information on Michigan medicine and wider campus so that you don't have to start from scratch. That's a useful thing that you can look at, including central support offices that we have talked about today, FFMI, CTSU, and how we have the infrastructure here to support you in your proposals and funding. Someone mentioned earlier, my team is involved in AI. That is true. We are always working to use AI to develop grant support resources to make your life easier and decrease administrative burden. One of the tools I wanted to point out is our AI letter of support writer. It's available at this link, and I'm sure we'll share slides. But this is a platform where you can use prompts and it will generate a letter of support template for you that you can use as a template. It will generate different letters of support for the same proposal, so it makes your life much easier as you're trying to get those letters together for foundation and other awards. I did want to highlight that we do have free proposal editing for University of Michigan investigators, including foundation proposals. And so the information is included here if you'd like to utilize those services. Also, other things that we offer in our office are writing accountability groups. These are coordinated and facilitated by a research development specialist, where we hold this time on your calendar to show up and write together and be held accountable for funding opportunities. If you are interested in one of these groups, please email rd-medschool@umich.edu and we'll place you on an interest list for future opportunities. We do have those ongoing right now, and I can let you know of the next available opportunity. I encourage you to stay informed. Like somebody mentioned earlier, we have a lot of resources and support for you here at the University of Michigan for your research and for finding funding. UMMS Research News is our Office of Research newsletter that goes out bi-weekly, where we publish funding opportunities, resources, workshops, and events. It would have included this event in here. It has future events in there, and our event and workshop page is there. Campus also distributes a research blueprint newsletter that also contains funding opportunities, workshops, and events. And as Brad mentioned, we have an upcoming event available within this same line of diversifying funding and strengthening your research portfolio. It's going to be Wednesday, October 8th from 2 to 4:30, directly across here in the BSRB seminar rooms. We are going to be exploring alternative funding opportunities. We'll have the library there to go into a pivot tutorial where you can look and see how to find other funding opportunities. Colleen Sherman will be coming to talk more about foundation funding and seeing if foundations are a fit for your science. FFMI will be there as well to talk about industry funding. We'll talk a little bit about institutional requirements for various funding agencies, which was brought up a little bit today, and also resources for strengthening proposals and pitches. And it's available now on our event page here. I've included some useful links and contact information for my office, and I think that's it. I also did want to mention one earlier, is if you are interested in large team grant funding for foundations, the med school has a large team grant corps as well that can help with medical school-led grants. We have helped with PCORI proposals and the like. We would love to help you out with your large team grants for any funder. So please email us at rd-medschool@umich.edu. Thank you. Back to you.
Thank you, Gina. And I saw some people scribbling down, taking notes. Just a note that the slides will be available to everybody after the fact. So if you need to get some information that was on these slides, it will be made available to you. We'll also have a recording of today's session for those that couldn't attend, if you want to tell your colleagues about it. But that ends today's program. I appreciate you all sticking around to the bitter end. But before you leave, a big thanks to Catherine Schultz and John Servos for the help in putting this together. They did the yeoman's work here, and we have to thank them for that. And also to Gus, our AV guy, for helping out with the technical issues today. Thank you all. Hope you found some value in this, and just know that there's light at the end of the tunnel here, even if things go south at NIH. So thanks so much.